Chapter 272 Go, and Tell His Majesty Immediately. Part 3. Durue Palace was a large place, and it was where the princesses of the imperial family would get married. Thus there was a garden to the side. In Shua and Yu Fu had their conversation in the garden. There were no other people nearby, and there was no need to worry about being heard by others while remaining in view of the other guests. It's exceptionally hot, and it's already the middle of summer. Yet the flowers in Durue Palace are blooming so beautifully. He reached out and ran his fingers through the flower petals without showing the slightest hint of emotion. Yufu suddenly recalled the first time that they had met. Gu Jiuge and the others had taken her out to see linen at night. However, she ended up falling into the river before being saved by Gu Shubai. At that time, In Shua had appeared before her, completely soaked. First impressions are often important. Even if Gu Shubai and the others suspected In Shua at that time, Yu Fu had already started viewing him as a good person. Moreover, he was an exceedingly handsome person. It was only after determining that the one behind the plot to assassinate Gu Shubai and Changzhou was In Shua that Yu Fu's view of him was completely ruined. All that remained for her were feelings of vigilance and indifference, but she still needed to pretend to be ignorant. With something as grand as two princesses getting married, it's natural that the imperial gardeners would be exceptionally careful with the flowers in hopes of them looking good. Speaking of this, I still haven't congratulated Prime Minister on getting married. While she was offering her congratulations, her expression showed that she was quite unhappy. She even felt awkward just saying it. In Shua, who had looked dejected for most of the day, suddenly burst out laughing. "You clearly know that this isn't a joyous matter for me or Princess Danyang. So what are you saying congratulations for? You're still so young, yet you're learning to just say niceties to suit the situation from others." Yu Fu also felt that there was nothing that could be done about it. This level of pleasantry still needs to be said. I know that you don't want to hear it, so that's why I only planned to offer my congratulations once. Who knew that you wouldn't be able to tolerate just that? The two went back and forth, and the tone of their conversation returned to normal, no longer feeling distant and unfamiliar. In Shua lowered his head with a smile but did not speak. If others said this 10 or 20 times, he would not mind, but he did not want to hear Yu Fu say it even once. In his mind, how could she possibly be compared with others? Just now, you were trying to give the phoenix hairpin to Western Kuan's princess, didn't you? That's also something that you should do. When a princess born of a concubine gets married, she should wear a coronet with 7 phoenixes. Princess Danyang is a selfish and petty person, and she thought that by not allowing Western Kuan's princess to wear a coronet with 7 phoenixes would make herself look good. She has no clue that others think of her as an idiotic laughingstock. Yu Fu looked at him in shock. He became prime minister at the age of 21, and it did not happen because he relied on his identity as the previous prime minister's eldest son. It was more a result of how he handled court work. He was very smooth in court, even winning the favor of Emperor Ning and the other court officials. When secretly talking about others, using such ugly words to describe someone else was not something that In Shua should do. Since you hate Princess Danyang so much, why not ask His Majesty to cancel the engagement? It's precisely because I hate her that I didn't cancel the engagement as she had hoped. More importantly, with the two of us getting married, she can no longer go after the eldest young sir of Marquis Gu's manor. You ought to be quite happy. In Shua avoided the most important reason by bringing up some minor reasons. Yu Fu figured it out but did not expose it. I can't say anything about being happy or not. It would indeed cause me less of a headache if she visited Marquis Gu's manor less often, but it's all trivial. She has no right to affect the affairs of Marquis Gu's manor. In Shua smiled. You're right. Even His Majesty might not have the right to affect them, much less Princess Danyang. This was what he meant by it. Yu Fu furrowed her brow and suddenly sneered. Many thanks for the love, Prime Minister. But I truly do wonder if someone like you know what love is? Even when she found out that he had dispatched someone with poison to assassinate Gu Shubai, her attitude toward him was not this distant. In Shua was surprised. He did not know what he had said wrong to make her angry. Of course, I do. Ever since I met you for the first time at Marquis Gu's manor, love is not won through fighting or murder. Love is a beautiful thing. How can you talk about love with bloodied hands? You're too frightening. Your ideas are too abnormal. Inshua forcibly restrained his voice. Gu Shubai is the person to whom you are engaged. Before you love me, I can only use violent methods to get rid of him. I admit that I am selfish, but that's unrelated to my feelings for you. Then what is the relation? Yu Fu did not get angry. On the contrary, she laughed, pointing at Durue Palace's main hall. Then how about this? You said that you want to marry me. Naturally, that would mean leaving the position of official wife for me. If you go in and tell His Majesty that you won't marry Princess Danyang, I will acknowledge your feelings. How about it? Chapter 273 Thank Your Majesty for Your Favor, Part 4. Inshua could remain calm and cool in front of others, but he could not muster any of that in front of her. He was like a young man who had just fallen in love, not knowing how to act. Yu Fu, I clearly just told you. Yu Fu summoned an image of Princess Danyang's usual demeanor and copied it, jutting up her chin to look at Inshua with a provocative look in her eyes. What a joke. In any case, I am someone who was personally conferred the title of princess by His Majesty. You repeatedly say that you want to marry me, yet you are going to marry someone else. Do you want me to be a concubine? I'll tell you that as long as you marry Princess Danyang today, don't even come close to me in the future. He had known her for quite some time, but this was the first time that he had ever seen her act so ruthlessly and willfully. A strange new feeling filled Inshua's heart. She still cared about him. That was why she did not like that he was marrying Princess Danyang. Yu Fu saw him lower his head in silence and thought that she had been too successful in imitating Princess Danyang, instantly making Inshua dislike her, and she quietly rejoiced. Prime Minister In, Princess Junjiang, it's time for the ceremony. Please return to the main hall. Outside the garden, a palace servant bowed and invited the two of them to return. Yu Fu turned around to look at Inshua, and he suddenly lifted his head with a smile on his face. Immediately after this, he strode toward the main hall. That smile did not look like there was any hatred, and Yu Fu quietly thought to herself that this was bad. Could it be that I went too far and pushed him to have no choice but to ask His Majesty for the wedding to be cancelled? This is bad. Haven't I just picked up a stone and dropped it on my foot? She regretted her actions and did not even have someone to discuss this with. Her fourth brother, who was still in the capital, remained in the manor to take care of some work. Forget it. She would go to the main hall first and see what would happen. The imperial family's weddings were far more complicated than those of the common folk. A wedding official dressed in red directed all of the participants to where they should be standing. Because there were two couples getting married, the scene was even more complicated. Yu Fu, come over here. Yu Fu suddenly heard someone call to her. It turned out that it was the eldest prince, who was standing at the lead position of the princes. He was currently waving for her to come over. The second prince was a little slow to notice Yu Fu, and he was annoyed to have lost out to the eldest prince again until he noticed a golden glow on Yu Fu's head. Sister Yu Fu, you wore the accessory that I gave you? Yu Fu was thinking about the matter with Inshua and was momentarily shocked from being pulled to the second prince's side. The eldest prince was quite displeased by how he intercepted her along the way. What accessories did you give to Yu Fu? Yu Fu being willing to wear accessories that he had given her made it clear that she was willing to acknowledge him, and the second prince's mood greatly improved. I had a jeweler made a set of head ornaments for Yu Fu. Yu Fu's only wearing a hairpin, but she still looks very good. It was only now that Yu Fu was able to react. Oh, there were two princesses getting married today, so it wasn't convenient to wear the phoenix hairpin, but it also couldn't be too plain. This hairpin was both a fitting color and not too plain, so I chose to wear this. Sister Yu Fu looks really good with it, and would surely look even better wearing the full set. The second prince had a fawning look on his face, and the eldest prince rolled his eyes at him. Second brother's choice of words is incorrect. Yu Fu chose to only wear a hairpin to avoid stealing the attention from the two brides. If she wore the full set, would it not make the two brides look quite bad? The second prince sneered with contempt, then looked at Yu Fu's clothes. Compared to the wedding clothes of the two brides, she was even more eye-catching, and he was quite stunned by the sight. Your Majesty. The two couples were in position, and the wedding official was preparing to carry out the first rite when Inshua suddenly spoke up. Emperor Ning was in the middle of telling his imperial uncle a joke and waved his hand. Prime Minister, what is it? Today is a day of celebration. If you have something to say, hurry up and say it. Don't miss the auspicious hour. Everyone's eyes were focused on Yin Shuwa. Yu Fu was worried. Emperor Ning was imposing, and Princess Danyang was hopeful. Most people were waiting to watch an entertaining drama unfold. They wanted to see what would happen between Princess Danyang and Yin Shuwa, this couple that seemed to get along but was actually quite conflicted. What to choose, whether to say it or not, Yin Shuwa carried an immense burden. After a moment of silence, the image of Yin Yin leaving the capital on a snowy day in a small carriage appeared in his mind. No, he could not say it. He could not neglect everything. He could not waste the protection that Yin Yin had provided him. He could not allow the Yin family's generations of work to be ruined by his feelings. Emperor Ning was a little annoyed, He dragged this out quite a bit, both waiting and annoyed, but it was mostly a threatening tone. After a long time, Yin Shuwa turned to Emperor Ning. Your Majesty, this subject just wanted to thank Your Majesty once more for your favor and thank Your Majesty for engaging Princess Danyang to this subject. For this subject to be able to marry Princess Danyang is this subject's good fortune. Chapter 274 More Than Just Inquire, Part 5. Yu Fu left the palace with her head down but was stopped at the road by two military horses. Fifth brother. Sixth brother. What have you two come for? We came to pick you up. Today's banquet was sure to be exceedingly boring, so we came to pick you up to play. A personal guard came up from behind with Yu Fu's horse, and she pointed at Gu Xiang and Gu Yi. Wasn't it said that you two would be helping fourth brother in the manor? Since you've come out to play, won't fourth brother be overwhelmed with work? Yu Fu smoothly climbed on her horse. I'll be going back to the manor first to help fourth brother. I can't bully him like this. In the entirety of the manor, Gu Xiang and Gu Yi only dared to bully Gu Wenqing, who told him to be so kind. Gu Xiang immediately took Yu Fu's reins to stop her. Little Yu Fu, don't be in such a rush. In truth, we didn't come out just to play. We also have proper work to attend to. Fourth brother has been busy in the manor, so he told us to go to Yushan building to see how Yu Guan is doing. When second brother left, he also left Miss Yao Yu in Yu Guan's care. While we are there, we will check up on Miss Yao Yu. Yu Fu nodded. All right, this can just barely be considered work. I just happen to be hungry, so let's go and taste Yushan building's new dishes. Yu Fu had a good eye for talent, and Yu Guan was a good choice for a shopkeeper. Not only did he think of having performances to attract guests, but he also pushed the chefs to come up with new dishes. Regardless of whether it was performances or dishes, the consistent rotation of fresh ideas naturally brought an endless line of guests. Gui laughed at her. Good. Earlier, you were saying that Gu Xiang and I had just come out to play, but now, you're clearly the one who's feeling peckish and wants to eat some new dishes. Ah, that's not it. Did you not eat your fill during today's wedding banquet? Yu Fu had been given a fright by Yin Shuwa, thinking that he really would ask Emperor Ning to cancel the wedding. How could she still have an appetite after that? After that, she felt a little disappointed to see Yin Shuwa not ask for the wedding to be canceled. In this famous capital, one of the court's young talents ended up deciding to ignore his feelings for the sake of rank and influence. You two have no idea just how strange the atmosphere of today's wedding was. Who could be in the mood to eat after that? First, Princess Danyang and Prime Minister Yin acted like strangers. The three siblings rode along on their horses as Yu Fu recounted what happened in the palace, and there were no shortages of gasps. Behind them, a small group of guards from the Gu family's army rode along to protect them. The citizens on the streets saw their group from far away and quickly moved to the side. Some of these citizens recognized members of the Gu family army. Hey, isn't that Princess Junjiang? Those two would be young sirs from Marquis Gu's manor? Gu Yi angrily said. It's only been just over a year since little Yu Fu came to the capital, yet the citizens already recognize you. We grew up in the capital, yet nobody recognizes us. Gu Xiang self-mockingly said. When eldest brother and second brother go out, it's natural that everyone would recognize them, but it's fine. In a few years, when we get to make contributions on the battlefield, we will also be recognized by others. Ah, The two young sirs look exactly the same, so they must be the fifth and sixth young sirs. Did you not know? The youngest sons of Marquis Gu's manor are twins. The citizens' voices very quickly reached their ears, and Yu Fu said with a smile, "Fifth brother and sixth brother are still luckier than third brother and fourth brother. They immediately know who you are when they see your faces. Looking the same also has its benefits. Otherwise, with Marquis Gu's manor having so many sons, how could the citizens recognize all of them? They just needed to pick a couple of the important ones." Gu Yi delightedly felt his face, saying it like this, "It's also true." The three stopped outside Yushan building. Yu Guan had received a report beforehand and came out with Hong Zue and Lu Xiao. "Young miss, young sirs, you've finally arrived." Miss Yao Yu has been waiting in the third floor's Lanzi room for quite some time. It seems that she was quite worried. Worried? Has she fully recovered from her illness? Yao Yu told everyone about what happened on that day between Chen Chuxiao and Yin Jiao, and Gu Xiang and Gu Yi took turns cursing Yin Shuo. She had gained quite a bit of information from the two. It turned out that the person that Prime Minister Yin really likes is young Miss Yu Fu. Yu Fu furrowed her brow. "I already made things clear with him today. Surely, he won't keep pursuing me after today. As for him having young Miss Yin inquire about the cabinet, this is something that we must defend against." Gui said, "He fears that his power will be reduced, so he inquires all over about the cabinet. This is within reason. Miss Yao Yu, why did you feel that this would be unfavorable for our Marquis Gu's manor?" Yao Yu thought for a moment. "I can't quite say for certain. It's just intuition. I have a feeling that someone who can so coldly use their own sister will definitely use some underhanded tactics against Marquis Gu's manor. I am also worried that I am overthinking it, so I hesitated for a number of days but ultimately decided to tell you." Yao Yu's intuition is the same as mine. Yu Fu let out a long sigh. "Have you guys ever considered that if Yin Shuo only wanted to inquire about information pertaining to the cabinet, why would he be willing to use young Miss Yin? Based on my understanding of him, what he wants to do is not inquire, but..." Gu Xiang threw out a guess. "Could it be to have it destroyed?" Chapter 275, An Arrow Through the Throat, Part 1. Yu Fu wrote about the situation in court in a letter and sent it to the border. At the same time, the first proper battle on the border was beginning. Smoke rose from Zhuguan, and the people around the city were in a panic. At the nearby Lesser Zhu Pass, General Su and General Liu were standing by, ready to join in at any time. "General, aren't you a little too nervous? When the Gu family's army fights, when have they ever needed our help?" A subordinate quietly said this, and General Su thought for a moment. Turning around, he descended from the top of the city wall. "You're right. It's just that I have been stationed at Lesser Zhu Pass for 5 years, and I see the smoke rising every year. But this is the first time that I have ever been able to hear the cannons from this far away. Listening to the fighting, just how fierce was the fighting from both sides? If not for him being tasked with being stationed at Lesser Zhu Pass, he really would have wanted to go to the front lines to see this once-in-a-lifetime fight." The soldiers followed his gaze and looked off into the distance. Aside from the billowing smoke, they could not see anything. At this time, I wonder if Weizhou's reserve troops have been dispatched to reinforce them. General Su suddenly remembered something. If orders for reinforcements come from the front lines, immediately contact this general. Even into the afternoon, an order for reinforcements never came to Lesser Zhu Pass. All that did arrive was a report of victory, and the citizens in the city rejoiced. Head General Gu personally took to the battlefield. It's natural that we would be victorious. With Head General present, we residents of Lesser Zhu Pass can live peacefully for decades. The citizens rejoiced, and the soldiers also discussed it. Only with the Gu family's army fighting on the front line can we enjoy a peaceful life at Lesser Zhu Pass. If the situation on the front lines was not so stable, we would also see some achievements at the costs of thousands of lives. Achievements obtained at the cost of thousands of lives. General Su contemplated this saying and thought to himself that if the cost of obtaining achievements on the battlefield was thousands of lives, he would rather spend the rest of his life guarding Lesser Zhu Pass as a normal general with no military accomplishments. Western Kuan's general was chased away from Zhuguan and away from the area near Zhu Mountain. As part of the vanguard, Gu Shubai raised his arm and was about to order a victorious pursuit when he heard an order shouted out by a communications officer. An order from the head general: do not pursue the defeated enemy. The vanguard is to retreat back to the camp. Stop. The cavalry at the very front of the group pulled on their horses' reins, and the horses reared up as sand was kicked up by their hooves. The soldiers' morale was low. In all of these years, they have never seen Western Kuin's border cities. They would just chase them away, but who knew that it would be the same this time around too? They looked over at Gu Shubai, and Gu Shubai looked over at the communications officer. This was not right. This was not what Gu Huaijiang had told them before. He had said that they would be on the offensive more than on the defensive. They would leave Western Kuin too afraid to invade ever again. Why would he have them retreat again? Gu Shubai's eyes were like nails, fiercely glaring at the retreating Western Kuin army. The communications officer repeated himself again. Young general, these are orders from the head general. Gu Shubai cast an unreconciled look at Western Kuin's army. At a distance of roughly 100 paces away, they would be able to chase down and kill half of their soldiers if they did give chase. It was because the border between the two countries lay in that 100-pace gap that they could not cross over the small line of rocks. They could only watch the people from Western Kuin escape. The feelings of resentment were ones that members of the Gu family army were quite familiar with. This was what happened every year. This was even more the case after the two countries established diplomatic relations this year. The court always talked about peace being the priority. Western Kuin soldiers threw down their helmets and armor, then fled in all directions after a moment of hesitation. The communications officer was at the back of the group and did not say anything. He just continued to direct the army on its way back. Yin Zheng rode over to Gu Shubai's side. Young general, will this be considered going against the head general's orders? The head general's orders were to not pursue the enemy and return to the camp. However, Gu Shubai stopped and shot an arrow at the enemy. He even shot an arrow through a person's neck, which was a sight that even frightened him. Gu Shubai turned his horse around with a relaxed demeanor. Think about it. Why did the head general tell us to turn back? What other reason could there possibly be? Yin Zheng acted like a learned person, reciting all of the reasons. Because the border is just ahead, and our eastern Ling is a reasonable country that does not invade its neighbors. We must not cross that border. As long as we can drive back Western Kuin's army, that's good. You can scarcely be blamed. When you were eavesdropping outside the tent that night, you were chased away by Uncle Yin halfway through the meeting, so you wouldn't understand Father's intentions. He rode back, and Yin Zheng curiously followed along behind him. What did the head general say after I was chased away? Young general, tell me. Father said that we will counterattack this time and hand Western Kuin a crushing defeat. We will make them too afraid to ever attack us ever again. Think about it. Since Father has already said this, why did he still tell us to not pursue? Chapter 276, Deceived by Father, Part 2. With Yin Zheng's brain, taking orders and leading soldiers into battle was manageable, but having him think about battle tactics on his own was something that could not be more difficult. Gu Shubai did not have any hopes that he could figure it out, so he just left him behind and rode back. Yin Zheng's voice suddenly came from behind. Head General didn't allow us to continue chasing to allow Western Kuin's people to think that things are just like before. It's to deceive the enemy. Young General shooting an arrow at the enemy is to show Western Kuin that even if we are angry, we still don't dare to cross the border. This is also to deceive the enemy. Gu Shubai sat up straight and stopped his horse. After a moment, he revealed a smile. It seemed that Yin Zheng eavesdropping outside the tent for so many years did show some signs of growth. Young General's shot really was a great finishing touch. Ha ha ha. The sound of laughter spread from the tent as Yin Zheng personally opened the tent flap for Gu Shubai. He then stood outside like a bodyguard. He actually had no intention of leaving. Gu Shubai glanced at him but did not expose him. Entering the tent, he reported on the situation at the front. Good, you may rise. Gu Huaijiang was very satisfied. Of my sons, you are the one who understands Father's intentions the best. Upon hearing that fighting has broken out at Zhuguan, your second brother and third brother have already sent people to question Father. He brought out the letters sent by Gu Jiugu and Gu Hanemo, and Gu Shubai received them to take a look. The one with Weizhou's wax seal was from Gu Jiugu, and the one with Changchuan's wax seal was from Gu Hanemo. There was no need to open them. Gu Shubai also knew what was written inside, but he still opened them. Sure enough, they said that Gu Huaijiang did not trust the two of them and said that he sent them to places where there was no fighting to try and protect them. He laughed and said, "Second brother and third brother are getting angry too early. Are they so certain that Weizhou and Changchuan won't see big battles?" Gu Huaijiang slightly raised an eyebrow and looked at him. Father and son reached an unspoken understanding. This action left the other generals present confused. Head general, young general, what do you mean by that? Didn't you say that the main battle will be at Zhuguan? How is that related to Weizhou and Changchuan? Gu Huaijiang pointed at the map of the border hanging on the wall. During today's battle, not only did we want to mislead the enemy, but the enemy was also testing us. We knew beforehand that the enemy's main force was stationed near Zhuguan. With their defeat today, could it be that they won't change their tactics? Head general means to say that they know that they can't defeat our main force, so they will change direction and go after Weizhou and Changchuan? This is bad. Second young sir and third young sir's sides are unprepared. Everyone started discussing the matter. Since Gu Huaijiang knew about this beforehand, why did he not contact Gu Jiugu and Gu Hanemo? Only Gu Shubai had guessed Gu Huaijiang's intentions. We can't let the two sides know. Only by leaving the two sides unprepared can Western Kuan get a taste of sweet victory. Only by allowing Western Kuan to get a taste of victory will they think that they have strategies that ensure success. Otherwise, with today's victory and the ability to strike first, it would be bad if Western Kuan didn't dare to attack us. What was bad about being too afraid to attack? Was their goal not to leave Western Kuan too afraid to attack? No. It was indeed like that in the past, but this time was different. This time, Gu Huaijiang did not want victory. It was more than that. In order to reach the final goal, he needed to have Western Kuan's army advance without any reservations. Like this, they would be able to completely annihilate them. Gu Huaijiang looked at Gu Shubai with a smile and a gentle look in his eyes. That is indeed the case. But father is also worried for your second brother and third brother. Worried that they will have accidents during their first times leading battles on their own. When they left, Gu Huaijiang told them that Zhuguan would be the main camp, while their camps would be secondary. If the main camp needed it, reinforcements could be called from their camps, and if the secondary camps needed reinforcements, they could be called from the main camp. That was why they left feeling very assured, and did not have any feeling of independently leading their troops. Now that this battle had concluded, it was time to see if they would still say that Gu Huaijiang did not trust them and just wanted to protect them. Report. General Shaoqi, news had come from Zhuguan. Western Kuan's army is coming to Weizhou. Report. General Hu Wei, an urgent report has come from the main camp. Western Kuan's army is coming to Changchuan. Gu Jiugu was complaining to his personal guards in the camp, saying that he wanted to go to the main camp to help his father and brother in the fight. Upon hearing this news, he immediately became lively. How many troops are there in total? How far away are they from the Weizhou camp? They are within 3 li of the camp. General Shaoqi, how should we combat them? How should they fight them? Gu Jiugu's eyes grew wide, looking at the soldier who delivered the news, how we should fight them. Has there been any news from the main camp at Zhuguan? Replying to General, aside from this information, there was nothing else. In Weizhou and Changchuan, Gu Jiugu and Gu Hanemo sat in their main tents, as their minds were a mess. There were no orders or directives. Did something happen at Zhuguan that left Gu Huaijiang unable to give orders, or did he intend to have them independently take command for practice? They had only just written letters in the morning, blaming Gu Huaijiang for not letting them set foot on the battlefield, but thinking about it now, they had been too naive. Officers, lead the troops out of the city to fight. At the two camps, Gu Jiugu and Gu Hanemo made almost the exact same move. Picking up their swords, they strode out of their tents full of heroic bearing. Deceived by Father, Part 2, with Yin Zheng's brain, taking orders and leading soldiers into battle was manageable, but having him think about battle tactics on his own was something that could not be more difficult. Gu Shubai did not have any hopes that he could figure it out, so he just left him behind and rode back. Yin Zheng's voice suddenly came from behind. Head General didn't allow us to continue chasing to allow Western Kuan's people to think that things are just like before. It's to deceive the enemy. Young General shooting an arrow at the enemy is to show Western Kuan that even if we are angry, we still don't dare to cross the border. This is also to deceive the enemy. Gu Shubai sat up straight and stopped his horse. After a moment, he revealed a smile. It seemed that Yin Zheng eavesdropping outside the tent for so many years did show some signs of growth. Young General's shot really was a great finishing touch. Ha ha ha. The sound of laughter spread from the tent as Yin Zheng personally opened the tent flap for Gu Shubai. He then stood outside like a bodyguard. Like this, they would be able to completely annihilate them. Gu Huaijiang looked at Gu Shubai with a smile and a gentle look in his eyes. That is indeed the case. But father is also worried for your second brother and third brother, worried that they will have accidents during their first times leading battles on their own. When they left, Gu Huaijiang told them that Zhuguan would be the main camp, while their camps would be secondary. If the main camp needed it, reinforcements could be called from their camps, and if the secondary camps needed reinforcements, they could be called from the main camp. That was why they left feeling very assured and did not have any feeling of independently leading their troops. Now that this battle had concluded, it was time to see if they would still say that Gu Huaijiang did not trust them and just wanted to protect them. Report. General Shaoqi, news had come from Zhuguan. Western Kuan's army is coming to Weizhou. Report. General Hu Wei, an urgent report has come from the main camp. Western Kuan's army is coming to Changchuan. Gu Jiuge was complaining to his personal guards in the camp, saying that he wanted to go to the main camp to help his father and brother in the fight. Upon hearing this news, he immediately became lively. How many troops are there in total? How far away are they from the Weizhou camp? They are within 3 li of the camp. General Shaoqi, how should we combat them? How should they fight them? Gu Jiuge's eyes grew wide, looking at the soldier who delivered the news, how we should fight them. Has there been any news from the main camp at Zhuguan? Replying to General, aside from this information, there was nothing else. In Weizhou and Changchuan, Gu Jiuge and Gu Hanemo sat in their main tents, as their minds were a mess. There were no orders or directives. Did something happen at Zhuguan that left Gu Huaijiang unable to give orders, or did he intend to have them independently take command for practice? They had only just written letters in the morning, blaming Gu Huaijiang for not letting them set foot on the battlefield, but thinking about it now, they had been too naive. Officers, lead the troops out of the city to fight. At the 2 camps, Gu Jiuge and Gu Hanemo made almost the exact same move. Picking up their swords, they strode out of their tents full of heroic bearing. Chapter 277 Female General in Red, Part 3. Outside Weizhou City, 2 armies faced off. Western Kuan's army was far larger than Eastern Ling's. The head general opposing Gu Jiuge was a female. Her clothes and horse were red like flames. She did not look very young. Wearing red armor and riding a horse, she was situated at the front of the large army and was looking at Gu Jiuge with contempt. Even a little brat who stinks of breast milk wants to copy others in learning to fight? Is the Gu family's army lacking in talent? This voice. For some reason, Gu Jiuge found it familiar. Looking carefully at the face under the helmet, the face had a 70% resemblance. One looked valiant and brave, while the other looked frail and affectionate. Having grown accustomed to that frail girl's face, Gu Jiuge was filled with an indescribable feeling from seeing the female general before him. The female general saw him distracted and disdainfully laughed. What? Have you brats from Eastern Ling never seen a woman that could set foot on the battlefield? Then take a good look today at how a woman will take over your city. Gu Jiuge did not have any experience in independently leading a battle, but Gu Huaijiang had already given his orders, so he was not too worried. Regaining his wits, he faintly laughed. General's tone to be so arrogant. I nearly thought that the one to suffer a defeat at Zhuguan was not your Liu family's army. While he laughed, he looked up at the military banner behind the female general. The Liu banner is very unfamiliar. May I ask what the name of the female general is? The young man was very handsome, but his words stung and made people feel disgusted. What a pity. The female general squinted her eyes, and the crinkles at the corners of her eyes seemed to show her experience on the battlefield. Unfortunately, this handsome young man was the son of the enemy. My Lu family is one of Western Kuan's military families. This general is the younger sister of head General Lu Kuang, Lu Tingting. You are young and naturally do not understand. Back when your father was still just a brat, our two families fought at Zhuguan. Gu Jiugu carefully chose his words. When my father was young, this female general must not yet have come of age, right? If he was a brat, what would you have been? Even if she was a female general who had much experience on the battlefield, the person on the other side of the battlefield still became red in the face. Nonsense. This general is 1 year older than your father. For women who were no longer young, which one would not like being seen as younger? The guards behind Gu Jiugu quietly spoke. General Shaoqi is too amazing. Even this sort of female barbarian can be made red in the face by his words. An order suddenly came from the other side. Kill? Goodness, this female barbarian was pretending to be embarrassed. She wanted to kill them while they were caught off guard. The two sides collided. Gu Jiugu had been startled by the female general's face, and he was lacking in experience. Thus, he did not have a good showing during this battle. He gave the order to retreat to Weizhou City, and Western Kuan's army assaulted the city and only retreated when reinforcements arrived from the main camp. Gu Jiugu's condition was terrible, his armor completely soaked in blood. Why did the reinforcements arrive so late from the main camp? The main camp warned me so early, so why did the troops only just arrive? Gu Jiugu was ferocious, ordering for the general of the reinforcements to come and answer questions. Who knew that the one to enter the tent would be Gu Shubai? Young general. Only now did Gu Jiugu give up. The two brothers talked for a while when Gu Jiugu suddenly remembered something. Right, eldest brother? There's something important that I must tell you and father. Do you know the background of the female general named Lu Tingting? Gu Shubai had just been at the top of Zhu Mountain a few days earlier and heard Gu Huaijiang tell him about the Lu family's resentment. He immediately nodded. She is the younger sister of Western Kuan's head general, Lu Kuang. She is also the younger sister of Western Kuan's famous female general, Lu Yinyin. Lu Yinyin? This name sounded very unfamiliar. Gu Jiugu searched through his mind but did not come up with any clues. Who is Lu Yinyin? 17 years ago, Lu Yinyin's army launched an assault on Zhuguan but was captured alive by father. In the end, she committed suicide while in captivity. Lu Kuang blamed this on father. His hatred of father and the Gu family's army consumes him. 17 years, Gu Jiugu muttered, eldest brother. I know the identity of Yin Jiyao's mother. Chapter 278 He should try to curry favor, Part 4. After the wedding between Kuren Yuyang and Uncle Ning, sure enough, they enjoyed a harmonious and loving marriage. On the other hand, the situation between Princess Danyang and Yin Shua became Emperor Ning's second biggest headache after the cabinet. On the third day after getting married, when the wife returned to the palace to visit family, Princess Danyang complained about how small and run-down the Prime Minister's manor was in front of every member of the inner palace. She wanted Emperor Ning to have a princess manor built for her and allow her to live in the princess manor like the princesses of the past. Emperor Ning angrily scolded her. The princesses of the past had their own manners because they lived during times of peace. Look after Easternling's current war situation. There's not even enough money for the war effort, so how could there be any money left to be spent on constructing a princess manor? There was not enough money, yet money was being sent to Marquis Gu's manor every day. In the past, Gu Huaijiang was the only one being rewarded. He was a great general with many military accomplishments, so it was normal for him to have earned Emperor Ning's favor. Now, there was also Yu Fu, who was also receiving an endless stream of rewards. As for her, the princess born of the empress, she had been pushed off to the side. She could not even have a manor of her own. Returning from the palace, Princess Danyang was filled with pent-up anger. Thus, every aspect of the Prime Minister's manor looked even more displeasing. Where is my husband? Replying to Princess, he is taking care of work in the outer study. Do you need this servant to pass along a message? As a palace maid who was part of the dowry, she followed Princess Danyang and married into the Prime Minister's manor, moving into one of the manor's best courtyards, the Eastern Courtyard. But no matter how good the Eastern Courtyard was, it could not compare with the manor's main courtyard. That was where the proper masters of the manor would reside. Princess Danyang lazily waved her hand and sat in front of the dresser. There's no need. I get annoyed just from looking at him. Diener hesitated for a moment before picking up the comb and brushing her hair. If you have something to say, just say it. With the Prime Minister's manor as it is, this one doesn't even have someone to speak to. If even you won't speak, would this one not die of boredom? Yes, Princess. Diener considered her words. On the day of the wedding, Princess used the excuse of not feeling well to not allow Master to come and visit, and Master went along with Princess' wishes. But on the second day, the bridal sheet was sent into the palace. Imperial Consort Xian and the others know that Princess did not consummate the marriage, so who knows how they're mocking Princess. Not to mention others mocking her. Even Diener and the nannies that had accompanied her out of the palace felt that this was improper. No matter how noble a lady was, once they were married, they needed to consummate the marriage. Otherwise, what sort of situation would that be? No matter how much she disliked Yin Shuo, she was already married to him. Could it be that she still wanted to preserve herself for someone else? Princess Danyang observed herself in the mirror and felt that her expression was getting uglier and uglier the more she listened. She was just barely able to force a smile at herself in the mirror. They can mock me as they please. This one does not plan to refuse to consummate the marriage with Yin Shuo forever. It's just that this one does not like him. He needs to curry favor with me first for me to agree. Diener was quietly anxious, but Master looks to be without desire. These days, with Princess not looking for him, he does not even set foot in the Eastern Courtyard. Does it look like he intends to curry favor with Princess? What if Yin Shuo never came to curry favor with Princess Danyang? Would she not end up alone for the rest of her life? Diener felt afraid just thinking about it. Looking at the mirror, the smile that Princess Danyang was forcing also drooped. If Yin Shuo came to curry favor with her, she would fiercely humiliate him. But if Yin Shuo did not come to curry favor with her, her heart felt a little empty. He should come to win her over. Yin Jiao faintly smiled. Many thanks, Princess, for the concern, but I am fine. It has been extremely hot recently, and the conditions have not been suitable for it to scab over, so it ended up like this. As a result, I have not been able to come and pay respects to Princess and hope that Princess will forgive me. Princess Danyang waved her hand. Forget it. Forget it. With you as you are, how do you plan to pay your respects? It would be best to go back and rest. Diener, send some of the birdnest that I brought with me out of the palace to young Miss Yin to help her recover. Yes, Princess. Yin Jiao saluted once more. Many thanks, Princess. After she left, Princess Danyang finally remembered that she had called Yin Jiao here to try and look for trouble. How did she end up giving her something? Forget it. For a girl's face to have such a serious wound, it was probable that it would never heal properly. Yin Jiao was so pitiful that she could not bring herself to trouble her any further. After much thought, Princess Danyang finally relented. Go to the outer study and see what my husband is doing. Chapter 279 Everything will be better when the second young sir returns. Part 5. Yin Jiao would rather ruin her face than help him inquire about the cabinet. This was something that Yin Shuo did not expect. He was cold by nature. He never had any good feelings about this younger sister born from a different mother. A fierce thought came to mind, and he decided to no longer allow the doctor to visit Yin Jiao's courtyard. Her courtyard had returned to only being given lettuce and radishes. There was no meat or fish, much less ice to cool down during the summer heat. Pear was extremely worried. Young Miss has picked at the scab on your forehead many times. It was already difficult for it to recover, but now, the eldest young sir won't even give you any ice. With the days being so hot, I fear that it won't ever get better. It would be best if it never got better. Yin Jiao looked as if she did not care about her own well-being. If I don't get better, he won't be able to send out his sister with a ruined face to try and gain information, right? Without my beauty, what can I use to be a honey trap? Young Miss Pear did not understand. Yin Jiao had lived like this before. This was not the first time that she had worked to gain information for her brother and father. Why was her reaction so negative this time? Was it because Chen Chuxiu had assaulted her? No, she had already been reluctant before going to see Chen Chuxiu. Pear shrilly said, "Young miss, is it because of second young Sir Gu that you—" "Shush." Yin Jiao covered her mouth then glanced at the door. Two tall grannies were lingering around outside. They had been sent by Yin Shuo to keep an eye on her. "Keep your voice down. Don't let the grannies outside hear you. After being at my side for such a long time, you should know what sort of person my brother is. In the past, he only wanted to kill the eldest young sir of Marquis Gu's manor. If he heard what you said, I fear that it would be bad for the second young sir." During the past few days of being shut in, she thought back on the things that had happened in the past. She already knew the reason that Yin Shuo wanted to kill Gu Shubai. It was because of Yu Fu. He liked Yu Fu. Ever since returning from seeing Yu Fu at Marquis Gu's manor for the first time, Yin Shuo's reaction had been extremely unusual. He could scarcely be blamed. With Yu Fu's beauty and intelligence, which man would not like her? The person whom she liked, did he not also like Yu Fu? Pear suppressed her voice. "Young miss is foolish. It's precisely because you like second young Sir Gu that you should obediently listen to eldest young Sir. Second young Sir Gu is currently at the border. How can he have the time to worry about young miss? If young miss allows your face to get ruined, how will you see second young sir when he returns?" Yin Jiao was stunned and reached up to feel the wound on her face, carefully looking at her reflection in the mirror. On her forehead was a wound the size of a baby's fist. Half of it was covered in a black scab, and the other half was pink flesh where she had picked away the scab. There were also parts that were festering with disgusting yellow pus. It was no wonder Princess Danyang had covered up her nose when she saw her. She anxiously said, "Pear, do you think that he will look down on me for looking like this?" Pear furrowed her brow and did not know how to respond. Since ancient times, heroes and beauties were paired together. The more heroic the man, the more beautiful the maiden. Just looking at Princess Junjiang's beauty, it could be seen that this was true. How could Gu Jiugu not love beauties? She wanted to tell the truth, but also worried that Yin Jiao would be miserable, so she could only be vague. Young Miss' previous beauty must have left an impression on second young Sir Yin. There are feelings between you two, so he won't look down on young Miss because of your ruined beauty. Yin Jiao's eyes lit up with hope. I told him my secret and turned against my brother for him. For him, I am willing to do anything. Will he still want to protect me? He will. Of course he will. Second young Sir treats young Miss so well. Pear coaxed her to sit down with a smile. Young Miss, just patiently endure it for a little, and don't make the eldest young Sir unhappy. Everything will get better once the second young Sir returns. Yin Jiao felt much better from listening to her comforting words. Even if he doesn't look down on my appearance, I am still worried that he will look down on me for being the daughter of a prostitute. How could he? Pear exaggeratedly said, "Young Miss is so sincere, telling the second young Sir the truth of your mother's identity. Second young Sir should feel moved. How could he look down on you? Moreover, so what if you were born of a concubine? Has young Miss forgotten that the second young Sir treats someone like Yao Yu, who worked in a brothel, very well? How could he despise young Miss for being born of a prostitute?" That is true. Yin Jiao finally smiled. Chapter 280 Fight to the Death, Part 1. Beyond Zhu Mountain, rows of black military tents stretched endlessly. Lu Tingting led her army back. Seeing a group of soldiers with white cloths wrapped around their heads and a casket placed to the side, her expression immediately changed. "Who is it?" she asked who was laying in the casket. Replying to Deputy General Lu, "It's General Qian. He had his throat pierced by an arrow shot by Eastern Ling's young general and died." Young general? Is it the one that led the reinforcements to Weizhou? When she retreated, she took a look but did not see too clearly. She just felt that there was a handsome young man whose bearing was different from the others. Compared to the handsome general defending Weizhou, his looks were even more impressive, and his bearing was completely different from others. An arrow through the throat? The next generation of the Gu family's army far exceeded her expectations. Lu Tingting glanced at the casket. "I know that you were his subordinates, but the battle still has not concluded. Isn't it still too soon to start grieving? For the sake of keeping the army's morale steady, quickly remove them. After saying this, she led her subordinates toward the central tent. Something like morale was something unnecessary to Western Kuan's army. Over the many years, there had been many changes in the name on the banner. Whether it was the Liu family's army, the Wang family's army, or the Xie family's army, they attacked Eastern Ling year after year. But when had they ever taken a single city from Eastern Ling? Emperor Kuan's eyes were focused on Eastern Ling's beautiful rivers and mountains. No matter how many people died while fighting on the border, he wanted Eastern Ling's territory. For this reason, all able-bodied people in Western Kuan, regardless of age or physical condition, learned how to fight. If they did not know that Eastern Ling only knew how to defend and did not dare attack, who would possibly be so careless with their lives and want to fight? Speaking of this, their morale was provided by Eastern Ling. It had been provided by the Gu family's army. The leading officer heaved a sigh and removed the white cloth from his head. Brothers, let's move the general's body. When this battle ends, we can send him back to his family home. One of the soldiers below followed his lead and removed his headband. Leader, I really hope that the Gu family's army quickly wins, so we can quickly go home. What nonsense are you spouting? The one who had been referred to as leader let out a shout and looked around. You can keep those words in your head, but saying them out loud is a capital crime. Other generals might be more lenient, but head General Liu will not spare you. Could it be that you don't know about the blood feud between those siblings and the Gu family's army? Eldest brother, I've come back. Inside the tent, Lu Kuang turned around and sharply looked at Lu Tingting. I heard that the Gu family's young general led a group to reinforce Weizhou, so I immediately sent someone to inform you. It's fortunate that nothing happened to you. Lu Tingting felt uneasy from his gaze. I'm fine. Gu Shubai led a group to reinforce, so I retreated the army and came back here. I also did not have any expectations of taking Weizhou in a single attack. On the contrary, I found something out. Weizhou's defenses were weaker than we had expected. I don't know if our preparations caught the Gu family's army unprepared, or if Gu Huaijiang placed too much trust in his son, sending a son with no battle experience to head Weizhou's defenses. At the time, Lu Yinyin was Western Kuan's most famous female general. After she died, Western Kuan's position as head general was given to the Wang family. After a decade, Western Kuan's top military brass was changed, and the golden seal of the head general was returned to the Liu family. After a decade of sharpening his blade, Lu Kuang had been waiting to avenge this shame for over a decade. Eldest brother, Lu Yinyin and I look the same, but I am not Lu Yinyin. I will not die a brutal death as she did. Lu Kuang sneered. You are not her. Of course, you are not her. You two were twins, and you two were the same age. However, she was better at leading troops than we are. This is why elder brother wants you to not underestimate the younger generation of the Gu family's army. Those who are arrogant will surely suffer defeat. You do not possess Yinin's talent, thus you must be more humble than Yinin. Lu Tingting's complexion was a little ugly, but she forced out a reply. Yes, eldest brother's word is final on this expedition. But has eldest brother considered changing the main battlefield to Weizhou? Changchuan could also work. Zhuguan is being defended by Gu Huaijiang himself, so it's truly quite difficult to fight here. If not for Gu Shubai rushing over today, I could have taken Weizhou. Take Weizhou and do what? Lu Kuang's expression sank. Did you think that by taking Weizhou and flanking them, we could find a breakthrough point at Zhuguan? Have you not considered that Gu Huaijiang knew that Zhuguan would be the site of the main battlefield, and that's why he stationed the majority of his troops at Zhuguan? Once we move our main forces to Weizhou, they will also move their troops. Either way, we can't avoid Gu Huaijiang's eyes. Since that's the case, we might as well not move. We will fight to the death at Zhuguan. Chapter 281 Pitying Yin Yin, Part 2. You are certain about what Zhou said about Yin Jiyao and Lu Tingting looking similar, but how similar? Gu Shubai reported what Gu Jiegu had discovered, and Gu Huaijiang took it very seriously. This made him notice something a little strange. Second brother said that it was a 70% resemblance. For people who are not related, it's impossible for them to look so similar. He felt that Yin Jiyao's unmentionable mother was Lu Yin. Do you think that this is possible? Before meeting with Gu Huaijiang, Gu Shubai felt that this was impossible. She was a female general who committed suicide on the battlefield, so how could she possibly become Prime Minister Yin's concubine and give birth to Yin Jiyao? After meeting with Gu Huaijiang, he clearly saw a look of acceptance of Gu Jiuge's theory in his father's eyes. Gu Huaijiang fell silent for a moment. There is something that father forgot to tell you. Lu Yinin and Lu Tingting of Western Kuan's Lu family, like Gu Xiang and Gu Yi, are twins. Twins? That's to say Lu Yinin and Lu Tingting look exactly the same? Lu Yinin and Lu Tingting looked exactly the same, and Yin Jiyao greatly resembled Lu Tingting. That meant that it was very likely that she was the daughter of Lu Yinin. Gu Huaijiang said, if not for Gu Jiugu mentioning it, father would have nearly forgotten about it. Back then, Lu Kuang executed 300 prisoners of war, including people from the Gu family's army. At that time, we were elated and thought that we could bring those prisoners of war back, but then those prisoners were suddenly executed. The soldiers were furious, and the situation got messy. Lu Yinin's corpse disappeared. At that time, father thought that the soldiers were resentful, so they secretly abandoned her corpse in the wilderness. Or it was a group from Western Kuren that secretly retrieved her corpse without us knowing. Thinking back on it, Lu Yinin was pretending to be dead, or the poison was treated after. Both of these are possible. Gu Shubai sarcastically laughed. So that's why. It's no wonder Prime Minister Yin hid the secret of his concubine from the brothel so fiercely. It turned out that she wasn't from a brothel. Instead, she was a famous female general from Western Kuan. How did Lu Yin, as a female general from Western Kuan, end up leaving with Yin Yin then pass away early? It was likely that these mysteries would never be solved. Gu Huaijiang looked up. He understood his son. There were not many things in this world that could make Gu Shubai have this sort of reaction. He was truly angry. Shubai, why are you so angry? Gu Shubai looked into his calm eyes. It was as if he had a bucket of cold water poured on his head, and he quickly calmed down. Father, it was I who got too agitated. Son just feels that you have been wronged. You have allowed Yin Yin to do as he pleased for so many years, and you have endured being suspected and envied by him. You have endured being incited and insulted. In the end, we find out that he is the reason for the unclear relationship between Western Kuan and us. Father, are you not angry? Gu Huaijiang shook his head with a smile. Not only was he not angry, but he was actually quite relaxed. The moonlight poured into the room like water, coming in through the tense skylight. It landed on the map of the border region, giving it an elegance similar to an ink painting. It was as if this was neither a military tent on the border nor on the battlefield. Instead, it felt like a family home in Jiangnan. Back when he had executed 300 prisoners of war, he held up a bloody sword and decapitated head and proclaimed that he would get revenge against Gu Huaijiang for his little sister. After a decade-long gap, he had finally come. Gu Huaijiang tilted his head back and looked out through the skylight. A crescent moon hung in the sky. Is today the 2nd? Gu Shubai followed his gaze and looked out. That's right. It will be the Mid-Autumn Festival in a few days. Unfortunately, we won't be able to celebrate the festival as a family at the manor. I wonder if they will make mooncakes in new shapes this year. We won't be able to enjoy any mooncakes, but Father will do my best to allow you guys to get back in time to eat osmanthus cakes. Osmanthuses were most fragrant during the 9th and 10th months. This meant, Gu Shubai rejoiced, his pursed lips curling into a smile. Everything is ready. We're just waiting for Lu Kuang to make his move. Chapter 282 Eating Mooncakes, Part 3. After one battle, Lu Kuang made countless changes to his tactics. The scouts sent out by Gu Huaijiang returned in waves with news of Lu Kuang sending troops to Weizhou and Lu Kuang sending troops to Changchuan. At the start, everyone thought that Lu Kuang was trying to attack the two fronts where the defenses were weaker, but as more and more troops were moved around, a quick calculation showed that there were not many troops left at the main camp outside Zhuguan. Head General moved all of his troops from Zhuguan to Weizhou and Changchuan. If things continue on like this, there will be a battle. Head General, Please give the order to move our troops to both sides. The fighting still hasn't started. What's the rush to reinforce them? Gu Huaijiang remained completely calm. Seeing two dark figures lingering outside the tent, he cleared his throat. Yin Zheng, Huayin, come in. The two people who had been named subconsciously wanted to flee, but after some thought, Head General was allowing them to go in. Strange, it was already lucky enough that they were not being chased away, but why were they being called in? The two of them were self-aware. They knew that based on their age and experience, they still did not have the qualifications to enter the main tent. Head General, do you have some orders? Gu Huaijiang did not bring up whether or not troops would be moved. On the contrary, he smiled and looked at the two. I heard that the young general say that the two of you have been frequently going into the city to buy supplies in preparation for a long battle. Is this the case? Yes. It turned out that he was asking about this, and Yin Zheng relaxed. We followed the young general's methods and accounted for the amount of food produced and taxes paid by Zhu Guan over the past 3 years. I have already reached an agreement with Zhu Guan's prefect to not immediately send the grains harvested in the border cities to the capital. If our military rations are running low, we can take some from the regions surrounding Zhuguan. Would that not be better than a long supply line from the capital? Gu Huaijiang nodded. Then I will give you two another mission. Go to the city and buy some mooncakes. We must ensure that every soldier is able to eat one. We will need to pass this year's Mid-Autumn Festival here, so we can't allow the soldiers to suffer. These two did not know much else, but they were familiar with the city. This was a task that they could handle very smoothly. Yin Zheng cheerfully said, Understood. Leave this matter to us. What sort of time was this? Yet Gu Huaijiang was still in the mood to eat mooncakes. The two from the younger generation cheerfully rushed out. While the generals in the tent were confused, Head General, moving the troops is the most pressing matter right now. Who knows when Lu Kuang will attack Weizhou and Changchuan? Chapter 283 A Year of Bad Luck, Part 4. It was another imperial banquet celebrating the Mid-Autumn Festival. Right before setting out, Yu Fu was a little disinterested. Thinking about the situation at the border, she wondered how long it would be before they could come back. Gu Xiang and Gu Yi went to the palace with her. Since Gu Huaijiang, Gu Shubai, and the others were not in the capital, Marquis Gu's manor's spot could not remain empty. Like usual, Gu Wenqing remained in his courtyard with a report in his hands. It was a book sent to every family and manor for the Mid-Autumn Festival. You guys go ahead. I need to keep watch at home. The manor can't be left without a master. On their way to the palace, Yu Fu felt a cold gust of wind enter the carriage and wrapped herself tighter in her cloak. Yao Lan lowered the curtain in the carriage. It's getting colder. In a few more days, the curtains in the carriages will need to be replaced with thicker ones. If young miss is cold, put on your coat. I'm not cold. It isn't even autumn. Yu Fu wore a stubborn expression, looking up at the sky. The large golden moon hung in the sky, slowly rising from behind the clouds. Do not miss me, for we both share the same bright moon. I wonder if eldest brother and the others can see the bright moon. Is it also this round? After a bit of thought, she smiled and said, It shouldn't be. The area around the border region is very open. The moon that eldest brother and the others are seeing is sure to be rounder and brighter than what we can see in the capital. Young Miss Head is filled with nothing but thoughts of the eldest young sir. Yao Lan teased her, but we have been receiving frequent reports from the border. Lord Marquis, the eldest young sir, and the others should be returning quite soon, right? They might be able to return in time to eat osmanthus cakes. Osmanthus cakes? Yu Fu rejoiced at the thought. Just thinking about its soft texture made her salivate. She tugged on Yao Lan's arm. Once the osmanthuses bloom, let's preserve some for when eldest brother and the others return. That way they can also eat them. The carriage suddenly stopped, and Gu Xiang turned his horse around to look inside the carriage. Little Yu Fu, we've arrived. The palace gates were directly before them, reflecting the large golden moon. It was like a magnificent painting from an old scroll. She stepped out of the carriage and stood in front of the palace gates, as a feeling of alienation suddenly washed over her. What's wrong? Do you miss father and our elder brothers? Gui descended from his horse and walked over to her side, letting out a sigh. I also miss them. In previous years, everyone would gather together to eat mooncakes during the Mid-Autumn Festival. This year, we're all scattered. He suddenly thought of something. Why do I feel that this sort of feeling is very familiar? Right, I remember. We didn't get to celebrate the New Year properly this past year. Half of us were in the capital and half of us were in Changzhou. It's no wonder people say that unlucky things should be avoided during the New Year, or the entire year will be filled with bad luck. Yu Fu thought about it. Sixth brother. Do you think that eldest brother will be pursued and poisoned like he had been during New Year's? Gui suddenly realized that he had misspoken. Smiling cheekily, he won't. Eldest brother is with the army and is leading his troops. Who could possibly poison him? It was I who was negligent for bringing it up, so don't worry about it. Gu Xiang secretly rolled his eyes at him. He clearly knew that Yu Fu was worried about Gu Shubai and the others. Saying that sort of thing would surely just make her even more worried. This twin brother of his really did not even have half of his smarts or insight. Gu Xiang helplessly shook his head and patted Yu Fu's shoulder. Don't worry. All of the reports that have come back from the border have been filled with good news. Father said that they should quickly be able to return in triumph. We might even receive word of their victory by tomorrow. Don't worry about it. Yu Fu vigorously nodded, then smiled radiantly. Let's see what sort of beautiful mooncakes we will have tonight. We can try and get a recipe from the Imperial kitchen. When Head General and the others return, we can have the chefs make some for them. She kindly smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. It was like sending In Shua a message, reminding him of what she had previously said. Since he did not ask for the wedding to be cancelled, he should not approach her ever again. This was the same today, even if she was the one who approached them first. In Shua lowered his head, and Princess Danyang rolled her eyes at him, thinking to herself that he never even treated her with this much respect. Yet he treated Yu Fu, someone who had been haphazardly conferred the title of princess, with such respect. Prime Minister, there's no need to be so courteous. Yu Fu pretended to be casual, saying, Why do I not see young Miss Yin? During the spring banquet, young Miss Yin's poem was exceptional. I heard that she and second brother are also friends, so I wanted to chat with her a little. Where has she gone? Princess Danyang snorted. Her forehead. She accidentally bumped her forehead on a door and got hurt. There are no major problems. Originally, she was going to come into the palace, but after getting hurt, she decided to remain in the manor to rest and recover. In Shua rushed to provide an explanation without any change in his expression, and Princess Danyang looked at him in confusion. Yao Yu said that In Jiao had been hurt from being pushed by young Sir Qin, yet In Shua insisted on pretending that she bumped into a door. Seeing Princess Danyang's expression, it was clear that she had some insight. But contrary to Yu Fu's expectations, she did not expose In Shua's lie. She just pursed her lips and leaned back in her seat. Chapter 284 Dispute in Court, Part 5. Once the banquet began, it followed the usual pattern, with the daughters of noble families performing to show off their talents. There seemed to be little interest in this year's performances. The older young sirs of Marquis Gu's manor were not present, and In Shua had become a husband. Looking around, how many people were worth putting on a performance for? Due to the lack of interest, young Miss Wang from Imperial Consort Xian's family was able to stand out and received a jade pendant from Emperor Ning. Yu Fu saw this and stood up to bow. Your Majesty, this humble girl also has a gift and wanted to present it to Your Majesty during the Mid-Autumn Festival. During today's palace banquet, everyone's eyes were mostly focused on the pair of newlywed princesses and their husbands. It was only after Yu Fu spoke up that everyone remembered that the father and sons of Marquis Gu's manor were still at the border. When drinking water, one might think of the source of the water. While they were enjoying the banquet and making merry, they should not forget about the soldiers fighting at the border. You've been considerate. Regardless of what this gift is, we will be happy. Emperor Ning happily laughed. Marquis Gu and the eldest young sir, along with the second young sir and the third young sir, are all at the border. Since you are concerned for them, and also show your concern for us, we feel quite satisfied. Yu Fu bowed deeply. leaving her seat and stepping forward. Eunuch Gao received the brocade box from her and brought it to Emperor Ning. She really knows how to kiss ass. Princess Danyang lowered her voice and snorted with disdain. Was she sharing her thoughts with Yin Shua? This was strange. Yin Shua smiled, regardless of whether she's truly concerned for His Majesty or if she's kissing ass. Princess should know that winning over His Majesty is what matters most. At her young age, she is far smarter than Princess. Princess Danyang lowered herself to speak with him for the sake of having him agree with her opinion. Who knew that he would actually say that she should learn from Yu Fu, and even say that she was not as smart as Yu Fu? She was furious. This one refuses to learn from her. You need to understand that this one is His Majesty's true daughter born of the Empress. Even without currying favor, nobody can compare with my position. Not learning was the correct decision. Yin Shua lifted his cup of wine and took a sip. He knew that the more he used Yu Fu as a comparison for her, the more likely Princess Danyang was to ignore him. This was to his liking. Eunuch Gao opened the brocade box, and Emperor Ning looked inside. He saw that it was a multicolored gemstone. Under the flickering light in the palace, it shone brilliantly. A multicolored gemstone. Emperor Ning searched through his mind, but could not think of any gems that had this sort of color. Curious, he looked at Yu Fu. Yu Fu said, "Your Majesty, this is a multicolored gem that the head general sent home. This gem is found in the mines on the border with Western Kuan. Even if an entire jade mine was exhausted, it's possible that one might not be found. There is a folk saying that says that finding one is an omen of victory." Emperor Ning picked up the small gem between his fingers and smiled brightly upon hearing that it was an omen of victory. Is there really such a saying? Replying to Your Majesty, there is. This subject has heard of it before. It's just that I have never seen the gem before. A high-ranking official below responded, and Emperor Ning rejoiced even more. Looking at this brilliant little gem, he liked it even more than all of the treasures in the imperial palace. It was at this time that a report came from outside the palace. Your Majesty, an urgent report. The captain of the imperial guards, Meng Fei, received the report from the soldiers' hands and brought it into the hall. Everyone present was shocked, quietly looking forward to the good news of victory. Victory had just been mentioned, so if the report mentioned a defeat, they might as well give up on a happy mid-autumn festival. Emperor Ning placed the multicolored gem back in the brocade box and waved to Meng Fei. Quickly bring it to us and let us see." Being concerned made her mind a mess. She was surely being too worried. Amidst the joy, Yin Shua suddenly stood up and cupped his hands toward Emperor Ning. "Your Majesty, this subject did not hear clearly just now." "What did you say?" "Marquis Gu crossed the border and eliminated 200,000 enemy troops." "What border was it that he crossed?" A cold gust suddenly blew through the joyous atmosphere as everyone's smiles froze. Emperor Ning furrowed his brow and looked up at Yin Shua with a particularly complicated expression. "Naturally, it's the border between Western Kuan and my Eastern Ling." "Then that is to say that Marquis Gu was not defending Eastern Ling's border in this battle. Instead, he was invading Western Kuan's territory?" The officials began discussing the matter amongst themselves, and the sound of arguments rose. Western Kuan and Eastern Ling have just established diplomatic relations, and Your Majesty has always emphasized peace and harmony. How can Marquis Gu cross the border to go and fight Western Kuan's army? What relations? That was a plot by Western Kuan with the goal of secretly taking our border cities. It's fine to not have such relations, but our Eastern Ling is a country of etiquette. Marquis Gu's actions do not reflect our style of living. Amidst the noise, Yu Fu pursed her lips. Chapter 285, Discussing the Situation, Part 1. He was speaking of Marquis Gu's manor, but the adults of Marquis Gu's manor were not present. Even the one who could barely be considered an adult, Gu Wenqing, had remained in the manor. Gu Xiang and Gui could only sit around and worry. If they had known that they would encounter this sort of situation, they would have had their fourth brother come into the palace. Now that all of the court officials were discussing this matter, what should they do? Yu Fu's gaze was focused on Emperor Ning. What the court officials thought was not important. What mattered most was what Emperor Ning thought. Your Majesty. Inshua put on an appearance of being gentle and harmless. May I ask your Majesty if Marquis Gu let your Majesty know about this beforehand? Emperor Ning's expression clearly told him that he had not. He had always thought of peace as being the most important thing and did not advocate for war with Western Kuan. He just hoped that the border cities could be protected. Gu Huaijiang also understood his feelings very well. After all these years, he had never led his army across the border. This time, why would he? Emperor Ning fell silent, making the discussions between the officials even more fervent. Suddenly, someone could be heard laughing in the hall. Yu Fu slowly stood up in front of everyone and saluted Emperor Ning. This humble girl congratulates your Majesty. It seems that the multicolored gem really was an omen of victory. It really is something. She then turned to Yin Shuo. As for Prime Minister Yin's earlier question, I just don't understand it. Arranging and mobilizing the troops is the job of the head general. Any change in the situation on the battlefield can affect the final outcome. Does Prime Minister Yin mean to say that when head general sees an opportunity to annihilate the enemy, he must first send someone back to report to His Majesty and wait for His Majesty's approval to be sent back before moving? These words were extremely sarcastic. The young girl stood at the Marquis Gu's manor's seat, the most venerated seat among the various officials. At this moment, she was representing Marquis Gu's manor, so she did not hold back in the slightest in defending Gu Huaijiang and Gu Shubai, who were fighting at the border. In Shuo opened his mouth, never expecting that he would need to confront Yu Fu so openly. This was not what he wanted. Marquis Gu's manor did not even leave someone who could manage its affairs behind, and left Yu Fu to speak up for them. Did those men not have any shame? What made him feel even more ashamed was that he could not stop himself from rebutting her argument. Princess Junjiang's words are incorrect. You are not from our Eastern Ling, and naturally do not know that our Eastern Ling is a country of etiquette. It has never invaded another country. When Western Kuan attacks, Marquis Gu leads his army to defend the border. Naturally, there is nothing wrong with this. But Marquis Gu leading his troops across the border to annihilate the enemy is a deliberate act of invasion. If our Eastern Ling violates its own rules, would it not become a joke? He actually used Yu Fu's background to make a point. Princess Danyang picked up a candied fruit and placed it in her mouth. Seeing Yin Shuo speak so sharply, she suddenly felt that he was much more handsome and steady. He also did not seem so detestable. You're actually talking about little Yu Fu like that. Gui immediately stood up. Prime Minister Yin, if you want to speak, just speak. Do you not feel that using Yu Fu's background to make a point is too improper? To say that Yu Fu does not understand that our Eastern Ling is a country of etiquette is a joke. Yu Fu is a princess, and when has she ever been improper? HM? Gu Xiang also stood up with a smile. Gui, how can you speak like that to the Prime Minister? Since Prime Minister wishes to make a point with her background, I will also go along with his wishes. The previous Prime Minister retired to the family home before reaching the age of retirement, and I'm sure that your Majesty and my lords understand the reason behind it. When the parents do not set a good example, the children will surely not do well. I wonder if Prime Minister Yin is protecting Eastern Ling's dignity or just opposing Marquis Gu's manor. The two youngest sons of Marquis Gu's manor saw that Yu Fu was being bullied and stood up to protect her. One spoke with rhetoric, while the other concealed needles and fluff. This left Yin Shuo not knowing how to react. What should have been a mid-autumn festival that united everyone with joy was now a stalemate. What happened to Yin Yin was a sore spot that Yin Shuo did not want to talk about. Gu Xiang's words sounded gentle, but they sounded like an even greater embarrassment to Yin Shuo. After a long pause, the corner of his mouth twitched into a stiff smile. Young sirs, there's no need to get angry. This official just wanted to discuss the matter at hand. If young sirs are angry, this official just won't talk about it. Watching Yu Fu get bullied, someone seated below could no longer sit still. Kuan Yu Yang wanted to stand up, but was resolutely stopped by Uncle Ning. The promise that you made to me on the day of our wedding, have you forgotten it? Kuan Yu Yang grimaced. With a miserable look on her face, she leaned against him and looked over at Yu Fu. Oh, discuss the matter as it is? Yu Fu smiled rather than get angry. She swept the gaze around the hall, starting from Emperor Ning. At a steady pace, she was completely calm and natural. Wherever her gaze moved, the people would subconsciously lower their heads, not daring to meet her gaze. She was clearly just a young girl who had not yet come of age, so why was she so dazzling to look at? She looked at Yin Shuo with a mocking look in her eyes. Who knew if she was mocking the couple's relationship, or if she was mocking them for distorting the truth? Since you want to discuss the matter, I will discuss the matter with you today. Chapter 286 Debate in Court, Part 2. In the third year of Huairan, Western Kuan's Wang family led an army of 50,000 and raided several small cities in Changchuan. The flames burned for 3 days, and half of Changchuan was burned down, with thousands of citizens being displaced. Huairan was the name of Emperor Ning's ruling era. The third year of Huairan that Yu Fu spoke of was shortly after Emperor Ning ascended the throne. At that time, Gu Huaijiang was still a young general full of valor on the battlefield, capable of moving like the wind. In the 8th year of Huairan, Western Kuan's Lu family led an army of 100,000. At that time, the famous female General Lu Yinyin was captured alive and committed suicide. Her brother, Lu Kuang, executed 300 prisoners of war from our eastern Ling, their blood flowing like a river. In the 15th year of Huairan, Western Kuan's Wang family led an army of 80,000 and assaulted the northern cities in Weizhou. They took a path through the Qinling Mountains and killed tens of thousands of guards and citizens. In the 23rd year of Huairan, which would be last year, Yu Fu paused and let out a long sigh. At that time, I was brought back from the border by the head general. The people in court believed that I was the head general's illegitimate daughter. The officials below lowered their heads in embarrassment, and even Emperor Ning felt a little uncomfortable. At that time, everyone thought this, including Yin Yin and Yin Shuo. After all, what sort of person would feel so at ease that they would bring a daughter back after fighting a war? Now, I will tell everyone why the head general brought me back. Yu Fu said. At that time, Western Kuan's army knew that they could not win and struck the head general with a poisoned arrow. The poison used was Kunlun snow. To the imperial physicians present tonight, there's surely no need for me to say any more than that, right? Kunlun snow? Was that not a poison that came from the peaks of Western Kuan's Kunlun mountain that had no antidote? The crowd was in an uproar. Nobody expected Yu Fu would have this sort of background. Emperor Ning was shocked and said, "No antidote?" Then saying it like this, "It was after you treated Marquis Gu that he brought you back to the capital?" He had heard a little about something pertaining to a savior, but Gu Huaijiang did not let anything slip about being poisoned. He thought that Gu Huaijiang had just suffered a flesh wound. How could he have known that it was so serious? Emperor Ning furrowed his brow, not even thinking about Imperial Consort Xian, who was pouring him a cup of wine. He just waved his hand in irritation. The woman held the wine kettle in her hand and awkwardly shrank back. Yu Fu smiled. "If your majesty wishes to hear about it, I can tell your majesty. I cut the head general open to treat the poison. At the time, I was only this big, so the knife was unsteady in my hand." She gestured her height next to her, and everyone thought back to when Yu Fu first arrived in the capital. Indeed, she was just a little sprout and looked to be no older than 10. His body was covered in injuries. There was almost no part that was unscathed. His abdomen, where I cut into, had multiple wounds. Head General did not want to tell your majesty, feeling that he had received too much of your majesty's favor and fearing that others might say that he was using his wounds to win more favor. Today, I am going against Head General's will by revealing this information. Even if he is unhappy with me, I had to reveal the truth. The truth is that Western Kuan has attacked Eastern Ling year after year, and they have killed countless soldiers and citizens. Could it be that Head General must watch these people die without being able to counterattack? The truth is that Western Kuan's people take advantage of Eastern Ling being a so-called country of etiquette to determine that we would never dare to cross the border to attack them. That's why they are able to act so brazen. The truth is that if Head General did not lead his army across the border to annihilate the enemy army, next year, the year after that, and for the rest of time, the citizens living on Eastern Ling's border will need to endure the flames of war. Everyone, She lifted her broad sleeves and pointed outside the hall. The moonlight cascaded down like water across the vast mountains. If there is still anyone who feels that the head general should not have crossed the border, I think that with your selflessness, you should change where you live with those living on the border. What does everyone think? Danyang, shut your mouth. Emperor Ning angrily scolded her. As a princess of Eastern Ling, you show no interest in the country's affairs nor the court's affairs, yet you have the nerve to question Yu Fu? Princess Danyang did not dare make a sound, but Kuan Yu Yang was finally unable to hold back any longer. Standing up, Your Majesty, this humble woman has something to say. Uncle Ning wanted to pull her back, but only caught a corner of her clothes. Kuan Yu Yang brushed him off and nearly knocked him over. This was the only downside to marrying a woman who was trained in martial arts. He could not stop her even if he wanted to. Your Majesty, this humble woman is a girl from Western Kuan and understands Emperor Kuan's thoughts better than everyone present. This humble woman believes that Princess Junjiang is completely right. Everyone in Western Kuan knows Marquis Gu is a god of war who has won hundreds of battles, but there are still people who dare to attack Eastern Ling's border cities. Does Your Majesty want to know why? It's because everyone knows that as long as they cross the border, no matter how valiant Marquis Gu is, he would not dare to cross the border to kill them. Chapter 288, Crossing the Border, Part 4, at the same time. Western Kuan's army retreated, and Gu Huaijiang ordered a small celebration. This allowed the soldiers to have some fun and could be considered as allowing them to celebrate the Mid-Autumn Festival. The mooncakes that Yin Zhang had purchased beforehand were distributed to the soldiers. They enjoyed the taste and were emotionally satisfied. Following Gu Huaijiang, they fought every year and won every year. What they were celebrating was not Western Kuan's army retreating. Instead, it was that they had finally crossed the border. With this crossing, it was Eastern Ling's first time crossing a border. This was something that would surely be written about in the annals of history. Our spies have reported that the head general of the Liu family's army, Liu Kuang, has been demoted to 6th rank. They said that Liu Kuang used the nation's army for a personal vendetta, which is the reason for losing 200,000 troops. In the main tent, Yin Zhang and other members of the younger generation poured water for tea. They could not drink wine in the camp, so they could only drink tea to celebrate. Lao Jin downed a cup of tea and angrily looked around. Damn! They clearly relied on the fact that the Gu family's army never crossed the border. They're too shameless. This time, we only crossed a few li into their territory, yet we completely annihilated them. That old shit, Emperor Kuan, must feel that he has lost too much face, so he placed all of the blame on Liu Kuang. Saying that it was his general who used the army for a personal vendetta was a bit better for his image than telling the truth. Everyone laughed. Lao Jin is right. Thinking about the expressions of those Western Kuan soldiers when we crossed the border, I can't help but laugh. Ha ha ha. The people stationed at Zhuguan's main camp all saw it. Only Gu Jiugu and Gu Hanemo did not see it. Eldest brother, what was the exact situation at that time? The two urged Gu Shubai to tell them. He glanced at everyone laughing, then lowered his voice, saying, At that time, Liu Kuang deliberately moved his troops to make us think that they were moving their main force to Weizhou and Changchuan, thinking that we would also move to meet them there. But father did not. When he led the army out, the enemy army very quickly realized that our numbers had not been reduced in the slightest, so we completely overpowered them. Speaking of, this Liu Kuang really didn't panic when faced with danger, immediately giving the order to retreat when he realized the situation. We pursued them until they crossed the border, at which point they relaxed. While they were planning to stop and take a break, we charged across the border. As father expected, the enemy army never thought that we would cross the border. They were like lambs to the slaughter. Just looking at a glance might make one believe that he was the crown prince. Looking more carefully, the robes that he wore were not bright yellow like the robes worn by the emperor or the crown prince. They were just a light yellow. Kuan Wushang faintly smiled and opened a medicine kit at his side. He ran his hand over the various bottles inside. His gentle movements made it seem as if he was caressing a treasure. After a long pause, he gestured to the guard accompanying him inside the carriage. When we arrive at the camp, immediately send a capable group north. No matter what, you must cut off the road from Immortals Valley to Zhuguan. Do you understand? Chapter 289, Understanding What Western Kuan Intends to Do, Part 5. When the sun came up, Gu Xiang and Gu Yi rushed over to Gu Wenqing's small courtyard, dragging the partially dressed Gu Wenqing out of bed. Fourth brother, this is bad. Quickly get up. Fourth brother, stop sleeping. Yu Fu's gone missing. Gu Wenqing was still in a daze. He did not sleep for the entire night, only returning to his room after personally seeing Yu Fu ride off with a group of 10 people. After returning, he tossed and turned all night. He only managed to fall asleep when the sun came up, but he was woken up by Gu Xiang and Gu Yi. Yu Fu has gone missing? Gu Yi urgently said. That's right. Gu Wenqing yawned. Oh, he wanted to lie back down and go back to sleep, but Gu Xiang and Gu Yi held him up by his arms, refusing to allow him to lie back down. What do you mean by that? Does fourth brother know where Yu Fu has gone? Gu Wenqing closed his eyes and allowed himself to be held up by the two. She went to the border to look for father and eldest brother. The two let go, and Gu Wenqing's back forcefully collided with the base of the bed, causing him to tightly furrow his brow. Fourth brother, how could you let her go to the border? Father and the others are fighting a war. How dangerous of a situation is that? Gu Wenqing adjusted his sleeping posture but did not open his eyes. What could we do if I didn't allow her to go? If Western Kuan made use of poison, aside from her, who could treat it? Even then, you can't let little Yu Fu go on her own. In any case, we could go along with her and protect her. Gu Wenqing rolled over and faced toward the wall, waving his hand in irritation. All right, the two of you should obediently stay in the manor. I need to go to the treasury in a quarter of an hour. Just let me sleep for a little while, all right? Gu Yi was about to say something but was dragged out by Gu Xiang. Forget it, let's not cause a fuss. Did you not see the dark circles under fourth brother's eyes? He must not have slept for the entire night. But he didn't wake us up. He could have let us accompany little Yu Fu to the border. The sound of the two muttering slowly grew distant, and Gu Wenqing suddenly opened his eyes. Facing the wall, he fiercely slammed his fist against it. Idiots! If not for the pile of work waiting for me in the treasury, I would have, for several days, there was no movement across the border from Western Kuan's army. Looking down from the top of Zhu Mountain, the tents that housed 250,000 troops had been drastically reduced in number. Only half of the original number remained. Half. Father, of the 250,000 troops in the Lu family's army, 150,000 were annihilated, and countless thousands were injured or fled. Based on the number of tents, there should still be 150,000 people. Could it be that Western Kuan still hasn't given up and has dispatched more soldiers? Even if they sent out more troops, it would just be in the tens of thousands. Based on Western Kuan's current numbers and morale, there's no chance of victory. Are they not afraid of dying? Visit Wuxia World. EU for extra chapters. Everyone began discussing this matter, and Gu Huaijiang said, through my many years of fighting against Western Kuan, I have gained some insight into Emperor Kuan's personality. The people of Western Kuan place great emphasis on face. This is especially true of Emperor Kuan. It's precisely because they lost this battle so brutally that he would refuse to give up. But he picked up the observations made by Yin Zheng from Zhu Mountain and shook his head. Based on these numbers, Emperor Kuan only dispatched 70 or 80,000 troops. That won't solve their problems at all. Father just can't understand it. If he really wants to cover up his humiliation, why send out so few troops? Gu Jiugu said, could it be that Western Kuan is truly that lacking in soldiers? Sun remembers seeing in books about Western Kuan that their country is sparsely populated, and their lands are barren. There are even fewer people capable of setting foot on the battlefield. If not for this, Western Kuan would not allow girls onto the battlefield. What you said is indeed correct, but that's not the only reason. Gu Huaijiang glanced at him. Western Kuan has 3 military families, the Lu family, the Wang family, and the Xie family. Think about it. On its own, the Liu family's army was able to dispatch 250,000 troops. Could the other two armies not have any troops? Their land is vast and sparsely populated, but that's just relative to the size of their territory. Rumors say that further to the west of western Kunlun's Kunlun Mountain is a vast plateau. If that territory is counted, western Kunlun's territory would not be much smaller than northern Li's territory. Gu Jiuge became pensive. It seemed that they had underestimated western Kunlun. It was not that Emperor Kunlun could not afford to send troops. Instead, he chose to only send 70 to 80,000 troops. Gu Hanemo looked around the tent. Behind him hung a map of the 3 countries on the continent. On the map, Northern Li was the most expansive. He suddenly said, "Father, is Northern Li densely populated or sparsely populated?" Gu Huaijiang followed his gaze and smiled. Father also does not know much about Northern Li's situation and can only speak on what little information has been revealed through history books. Father speculates that Northern Li is densely populated. It might be even more densely populated than Eastern Ling. They were densely populated, which meant that they would have a large army. The members of the younger generation looked over at the map of Northern Li. The continent was shaped like a rooster with its head held high. In line with that depiction, Northern Li would be the upper body of the rooster, while Eastern Ling and Western Kurin formed the lower body. They had spent too long in the capital, enjoying the prosperity and culture. They never realized that of the 3 countries, Eastern Ling's territory was actually the smallest. Though the flames of war have burned for over a century, it had been limited to the shared border with Western Kunlun. This could be considered fortunate. Where the 3 countries met was a conspicuous area. Immortals Valley was the last untouched area of this world, divorced from all conflicts. Gu Shubai suddenly said, "Father, I know what Western Kunlun intends to do." Chapter 290 Rolling After a Fall, Desperate Additional Update. Rain fell as if being poured out of a bucket, while the thunder roared. Wearing their raincoats, the soldiers moved around the camp and inspected the sandbags meant to keep the water out. This was especially true for the areas near the mountains, as Lao Jin personally directed the troops in the rain. Carrying a sandbag, he trotted over. Wearing a raincoat and cloak, Gu Jiuge stepped forward. "Where are they carrying the sandbags?" "They're carrying them to the foot of the mountain to create a barrier. It's raining harder and harder, and it would be disastrous if the earth from the mountain slid down." Lao Jin's loud shouting could be heard over the din of the rain. Gu Jiuge could hear him clearly. "Then I'll go with you. At any rate, there's nothing happening at the camp." Counting the days, Western Kunlun's new general should be on his way. With the heavy rain, they would be unable to travel as quickly, so they should likely be delayed by a few more days. Lao Jin laughed and looked over at the large tent. Gu Huaijiang and Gu Shubai were standing under the tent and observing the rain, while Gu Hanemo had gone somewhere on his own. "Good. If second young sir doesn't find it dirty, come with us." Gu Huaijiang watched them leave, then looked at the distant mountains. Through the heavy rain, he could only see a faint outline. People have already been sent to investigate the road to Immortals Valley, but with the consecutive days of heavy rain, who knows just when they will be able to come back. They had been leading troops for many years and had experienced all types of bad weather. What they feared most, however, was not snow. It was wind and rain. Strong winds with rain would make advancing difficult. For them, even the slightest delay might mean missing out on the most optimal timing for battle. The rainwater on the canopy slid down the angled sides and dripped down in streams that resembled beads before mixing back with the falling rain. Gu Shubai said, "Fortunately, the heavy rain goes both ways. Our people are delayed, and Western Kunlun's new general will also be delayed." Gu Huaijiang let out a sigh. "After crossing the border, we have lost quite a few of our spies in Western Kunlun. This time, we don't even know who the newly deployed general from Western Kunlun is. We don't have any idea how far away they are." It was a simple fact that Gu Huaijiang had encountered every one of Western Kunlun's top generals, and he had some understanding of the other side's tendencies, thus there was no need for him to worry. But this time, things were different. This time, Western Kunlun only sent out 70 to 80,000 troops. This did not follow the standard routine. Thus, it was possible that this general would not follow the standard routine. An abnormal number of troops and an abnormal general. Could it be the person that they were speculating? The consecutive days of heavy rain did not just create problems for the soldiers at the border. Yu Fu's carriage traveled quickly, but who knew that she would run into heavy rain when she got close to the border? In the end, she was delayed in a post house for 2 days. Young miss, there are strong winds and heavy rain outside. It would be best to stay inside. Yao Lan brought in hot tea from the outside. The post house was lacking in many supplies, and even the tea leaves were not fresh. It was quite difficult to find good tea. Standing in the corridor, Yu Fu watched the plants get pushed around by the wind and reached out to catch the rain. The rain landed on her tender palm and quickly filled the small cavity. Yu Fu brought it closer to take a look, then splashed the water back out into the rain. She was able to catch so much rain just by sticking her hand out. If she went outside, she would be completely soaked in an instant. She turned around to go back inside. Before she could cross the threshold, she turned around and walked along the corridor. Hey, young miss. Yao Lan chased after her, not knowing where she was going. In the front yard of the post house, the 10 guards that were accompanying her were totally bored. While drinking tea, they talked about the rain. As I see it, this rain won't stop for another 10 days to half a month. 10 days to half a month? Then wouldn't the suffering that young miss has endured from this rushed journey have been for nothing? Ha! It's raining so hard that you can't even see the road. It's not like we couldn't make do and advance slowly, but would you have the young miss travel like that? After saying this, he heaved a sigh. They did not dare say this sort of thing in front of Yu Fu. They could only discuss this sort of thing in private. Yu Fu came from the backyard and happened to hear this. Are you saying that we can travel? Everyone instantly stood up, their backs perfectly straight. Young miss, why have you come over? It was raining so heavily that they could not hear Yu Fu's footsteps. Yu Fu stared at the one who had said that they could travel. Answer my question. You said that we could make do in advance. How would we do that? The soldier anxiously said, Young miss, what I meant was that we could make do. How could you go through the rain with us? If head general found out, he would have us skinned. He won't. It was I who chose to come along. Nobody will blame you. I absolutely must get to the camp as soon as possible, or something terrible will happen. The soldier was troubled and said, Young miss, even if we traveled in the rain, we won't be able to move very quickly. It would already be considered quite good if we could even move at half of our previous speed. From her to Zhuguan will require 5 or 6 more days. If young miss was to travel in the rain for 5 or 6 days while getting soaked, how can your body endure it? Not to mention Yu Fu enduring it, but even these sturdy men did not dare say that they could handle it. Another soldier said, Young miss, we were just messing around while talking about it amongst ourselves. You can't take it seriously. In this sort of weather, even if you were in the army, the head general would not possibly allow us to continue marching. This so-called making do is just us making wild statements. Don't pay him any mind. Right, we were just messing around. Young miss, listen to our advice. It's really not possible to go out in this sort of weather. Yu Fu thought for a moment. Aside from worrying about whether or not you can endure being soaked by the rain, are there any other problems? She was surprisingly calm and not as insistent on leaving as they had imagined. She also had not been scared off by what they had said. Instead, she carefully investigated whether or not it could be done. Visit Wuxia World. EU for extra chapters. This sort of thinking was like when an officer led a group of soldiers. Everyone was stunned, but everyone quickly began bringing up problems in hopes of having Yu Fu give up. Aside from getting sick from getting soaked in the rain, we're also worried about the wind and rain slowing us down. The original travel duration will be much longer. Aside from that, this journey to the border is dangerous. If the horse loses its footing, it can lead to injury or even falling from the horse. Yu Fu noted all of these things down. Is there anything else? The soldiers looked at each other. It seems that there aren't any for now. Yu Fu casually sat down next to them, then waved for them to also sit down. One of the soldiers looked at the chair that Yu Fu sat on and saw that it was covered with mud. She just sat on it without any trace of pretentiousness that a young miss of a large family usually had. After everyone sat down, they listened to her analysis. First, the matter of getting sick from getting soaked by the rain is easy to handle. I will give everyone medicine before setting out. If everyone takes some medicine every day, you will not get sick. This was Yufu's area of expertise, so everyone nodded their heads in acceptance. Second, the matter of traveling slowly is not a problem. No matter how slowly we travel, it will be faster than waiting here in the post house. I am not afraid of a little hardship. What about everyone else? Everyone smiled plainly. If even a fragile young girl like young Miss is not afraid of some hardship, how could grown men like us be afraid? Yufu expected this to be the case. If not for her and Yao Lan being present, these soldiers might have already taken their chances and advanced through the rain to reach Zhuguan. As for the third matter, I don't have any experience with riding in the rain. Does anyone have any ways to prevent falling from your horse? With the conversation already reaching this point, the soldiers no longer hesitated. There is a way, but we can't guarantee it will work. For people who are trained in martial arts like us, falling off a horse is not a big problem. There's a technique called rolling after a fall. Does young Miss know about it? Yufu shook her head. The earlier fervor had now disappeared, and she once again resembled an ignorant little girl who had no knowledge of martial arts. Third brother taught me a little about using a sword. Eldest brother taught me how to throw needles, and Yu Yang taught me how to shoot an arrow. But I only learned a little of each. I truly can't be considered someone who knows martial arts. The confused look of the young girl's eyes stirred feelings of a desire to protect her amongst the soldiers. It's fine if you don't know. I will teach you. A soldier leaped onto the table and lay down, rolling to the edge of the table. Young Miss, watch closely. She saw him curl up into a ball the instant that he rolled off the table and roll a few more times after hitting the ground. Another soldier explained to Yufu, the purpose of curling up is to protect the head and internal organs from being damaged by rocks, and rolling will help dissipate the force from the fall. Like this, the injuries can be reduced and won't be too serious. It turned out that this was the technique. Yufu nodded her head to show that she understood. Stepping onto the table, she also gave it a try. Young Miss, what are you doing? Yao Lan waited in the backyard for a long time, but did not see Yufu return. Thus she came to the front yard to look for her. Upon arriving, she saw Yufu stand on the table, while 10 soldiers watched her with expectant eyes. No matter how she looked at it, this scene was weird. Yufu heard her voice and said with a smile, "You came at the right time. You also need to learn this technique. After you've learned it, we can continue on our way." After saying this, she lay down on the table then rolled onto the ground. While she fell, she copied the soldier and began rolling. She also heard Yao Lan's shrill screams. Chapter 291 Silt in the Tea, Part 1. Something like learning martial arts was not done overnight. Yufu only saw the soldier demonstrate it once, and the results were as imagined. Yao Lan applied medicine to Yufu's arms while making a fuss. "Young Miss, you gave me a scare. I thought that you were going crazy and wanted to jump off the table." As she said this, she looked at the soldiers to the side. It has already been hard enough on the young miss to travel here from the capital. You guys actually still let her get hurt. Humph, I will refuse to provide you with any medicine. Get it for yourselves. The medicine that she was speaking of was the medicine that Yufu was going to give everyone to prevent illness. The soldiers wore bitter expressions. They did not think that Yufu's arm would bruise from rolling off of such a low table onto the ground. This was true. They were sturdy men with thick skin, so it was natural that they would be fine, but Yufu was different. Thinking about it like this, the soldiers were even more adamant in their refusal to continue on in the rain. "Young Miss, let's just forget about it. We only managed to learn this life-saving technique after many years of training in the military. How can you learn it in such a short span of time?" Yao Lan rubbed some rubbing alcohol on her arm. After applying it, she forcefully rubbed the bruise away, causing Yufu to grimace in pain. Hearing the soldiers' discouraged tones, she immediately stood up. "I can learn it, and I can make sure Yao Lan learns it too. Go and make the medicine based on my prescription. After it's been made, Everyone needs to drink a bowl. Yaolan and I will be practicing here until we manage to learn it properly. Young miss, the soldiers wanted to say a little more, but Yu Fu looked up. Go quickly. Do I need to abandon my face? Were they planning to continue watching her unseemly falling position? Everyone obediently retreated. Yu Fu reached out to Yaolan. Yaolan, come up here. Once we have finished training on this shorter table, we can train on the larger table. We absolutely must learn it by today, so we can set out tomorrow morning. Yaolan looked where she was pointing. The high table in the corner of the yard was even taller than her height. She wanted to cry but had no tears. Young miss, you're killing me. With how steep Zhu Mountain was, whenever the Gu family's army ascended the mountain in the rain to observe the situation, there would always be someone who got injured during the descent. There would even be people who would lose their lives. With such heavy rain, would they even be able to see the mountain pass? Gu Huaijiang decided to withdraw from the outpost on Zhu Mountain, leaving a few people to defend against a surprise attack. It was clear without even needing to think about it that nobody would launch a surprise attack with such poor weather. Head General, it's raining too heavily. The sandbags can't block the rain at all. Many tents on the edges have already been washed away by the mud and rain. Lao Jin entered the main tent with his thick raincoat. He was standing up perfectly straight, so his appearance was a little strange. Yin Huasher cracked a rare joke. At a glance, I thought that a giant porcupine rolled in, and I was about to pull out my sword. Here, take the big porcupine. Lao Jin took off the cloak and cheerfully tossed it at him, thoroughly soaking him. He then looked up at the top. Head General, that area can no longer be lived on. Fortunately, there were only a few soldiers stationed there, so I made the decision to have relocated to a safe location. Gu Huaijiang said, have all of the soldiers whose tents have been collapsed by mudslides brought back. The ones who are also in imminent danger should also be brought back. This rain will continue falling for many more days. Don't let the soldiers get washed away in the middle of the night. Lao Jin removed his raincoat while answering. Understood. I will tell them in a moment. I will have the row of tents nearest the mountain set up in a different location. Yin Huasher poured him a cup of hot tea. Look at you. You're completely soaked. Have some tea and warm up. Lao Jin received the cup with a smile but immediately frowned upon lifting the cup's lid. Hey, old Yao, you're too unwelcoming. Why is there silt in this tea? Silt? Yin Huasher received the cup of tea and looked inside. Sure enough, there were a few grains of sand. That's right. The consecutive days of rain have made the water in the well dirty. When the soldiers were preparing the tea, they probably didn't notice. Just bear with it. We've followed the head general all over for decades. We've even drank water that was mostly mud. You're still worried about this? Lao Jin was unreserved. I don't mind. But we can't have head general and the young general drink this, right? He picked up the teapot in the tent and took a look. Sure enough, there was a layer of silt at the bottom. Little Ian, go and get some clean water. The tea is full of sand. His son was standing outside the tent. Hearing this command, he immediately entered the tent and received the teapot. Taking a look inside, he turned back around. Dad, this is already the cleanest water in the camp. The two rivers nearby are so yellow that they're like mudslides. Not even the wells nearby have remained unaffected. Even the water that the soldiers used to make rice has sand in it. The cleanest water was selected to be brought to the main tent. Gu Huaijiang was in the middle of looking over some documents and did not even bother looking up. Lao Jin, just leave it be. The water that the soldiers are drinking is even dirtier than this. It's not like we haven't needed to drink dirty water before. Don't trouble the younger generation. Lao Jin was stunned but obediently put the teapot back down. Damn. If it keeps raining like this, will we even be able to eat? He did not want to taste sand when he ate. With a whoosh, Gu Shubai entered the tent. His usually white clothes were clearly partially soaked, yet he was particularly calm. Father, it's bad. The road to Immortals Valley has been blocked by Western Kuan. It's no wonder the number of people that they sent to Zhuguan was so low. They were all sent to block the path to Immortals Valley. Visit Wuxia World. EU for extra chapters. Gu Huaijiang's hand froze as he stood up to say, It's no wonder there were so few reinforcements. It turns out that they have no intention of fighting us head-on. Western Kuin has sent so many disciples to Immortals Valley over the years, and they finally plan to make use of them. What? Western Kuin plans to send a group of people to poison us? Lao Jin's eyes twitched. With no time to consider drinking his tea, he thought back to when Gu Huaijiang had been poisoned by Kunlun snow and how chaotic things at the camp had become. At that time, it was fortunate that he had brought Yu Fu from Immortals Valley. That had saved Gu Huaijiang's life, but this time, Immortals Valley had already been blockaded. Western Kuin did not want to give them a chance to go and ask Immortals Valley for assistance. Suddenly, a head poked into the tent. It was Yinzhang. Young Miss Yu Fu said that the deity of medicine is able to take on tens of thousands of troops on his own. With a wave of his hand, he can kill a swath of people with poison. If those people from Western Kuin were to raise their arms and poison us, what would we do? His speech might have been unrefined, but Gu Shubai thought of Yu Fu's surface-level martial arts, and even she could take many people's lives just by throwing her poison needles. What about the people from Western Kuin who have been planning this ahead of time? Lao Jin looked at Yin Zheng, then at Gu Huaijiang and Gu Shubai. What should we do about this? The road to Immortals Valley has been blocked. Should we send someone back to the capital to bring young Miss Yu Fu? Gu Huaijiang lifted his eyes to glance at him, and the latter immediately fell silent. He naturally understood that having Yu Fu travel a great distance to the desolate border was not good. Moreover, the consecutive days of heavy rain made the roads hard to traverse, but the people of Western Kuin planned to use poison. Aside from Yu Fu, who else could do anything about it? Yin Huasher said, "Fortunately, it has not stopped raining, and Western Kuin's new general has not yet arrived. Even if they want to poison us, it won't happen so quickly. During this time, we should place more focus on our defenses. First, we need to protect our food stores and water sources. Second, we need to have the military doctors prepare medicines to deal with the poisons." Didn't young Miss Yu Fu provide us with large quantities of medicine to deal with fevers? This was all that they could do today. The atmosphere inside the tent was a little heavy, and Lao Jin dryly chuckled. "Young general, you are completely soaked. Quickly sit down and drink some tea to warm up." It was still the same teapot as earlier on the stove, and Lao Jin had forgotten about the sand inside, directly pouring a cup of tea for Gu Shubai. Everyone sat back down, and Gu Shubai received the cup and sniffed it, his handsome eyebrows slightly furrowed. Only now did Lao Jin remember that the water inside was dirty, as he smacked himself on the head. "Hold on, the water for that tea is not clean. I'll go out and get a new pot of water. How can this be stomached?" He picked up the teapot and started walking out when Gu Shubai suddenly stopped him. "Hold on, how is this water not clean? There is sand in it, and it smells of mud." Lao Jin handed the teapot to him with a look of disgust, and Gu Shubai sniffed the top of the teapot. He then looked at the cup of tea, and everyone was a little confused. It was just some dirty water. Why was he looking at it for so long? He lifted the cup and took a sip before immediately spitting it out and putting the cup back on the table. "There's something wrong with the water. Carefully smell it. Is it really the smell of mud?" Everyone picked up their cups from the table. Gu Huaijiang even took a sip, and Gu Shubai immediately rushed to stop him. "Father!" Gu Huaijiang was very familiar with the taste of muddy water, and this water did not just taste like it contained mud. Gu Huaijiang spat the water back into the cup. "Immediately give the order for the armies to throw away all food and tea made using this water. They are not to use it again. All of the water sources at the camp are to be sealed, and the soldiers are not permitted to use the water to make food. Shubai, lead the military doctors to inspect the wells and check on the water quality." Chapter 292, Nothing Will Happen to Him, Part 2. Outside the camp, a stream of water flowed down the mountain. Once the stream reached the location of the Gu family's army's camp, the flow of water would slow down due to the terrain. As a result, the water slowly seeped into the well. On sunny days with clear and clean well water, the soldiers liked to fill buckets with water and pour it on their heads after a day of training. When they now looked down into the well, The clear water had become murky and yellow. Huh. In the group, someone in the group let out a sigh, but this sound was quickly drowned out by the sound of the rain. Being directed by the military doctors, the soldiers filled a bucket with well water and carefully poured the water into a water skin to be preserved. After the water from all of the wells had been inspected, they could confirm their speculation. Doctor, is there poison in this water? The doctor, dressed in a thick raincoat, kept his head down, his expression hidden by a large bamboo hat. His response was ambiguous and as clear as mud. Whether or not there is poison, I will only know after inspecting it carefully. I can't tell if there's anything strange just at a glance. He brought the water skin up to his nose and sniffed it. Aside from the smell of mud, he did not smell anything else. He just hoped that the young general was overthinking it. He consoled himself, and the soldiers were able to tell that the one who had sighed was the doctor. In the main tent, all of the military officers of 4th rank or higher from the Gu family's army were present. They all wore solemn expressions as they waited for Gu Huaijiang to give his orders. Head General, what exactly is wrong with the water? Before it was inspected, Gu Huaijiang had already given the order for all food to be tossed away. This did not seem to be just a suspicion, but no matter how Lao Jin and the others sniffed it, they could not smell anything other than the mud in the water. Thus they could not help but worry. A cup of tea was placed before Gu Huaijiang. This was tea that the soldiers had poured for him before they had realized that there was something wrong with the water. As the tea grew cold, the water's original smell became much clearer. His gaze was always focused on the cup of tea and only looked up after a long moment of silence. We just need to wait for the report from the military doctor. I have already ordered the soldiers to use water from behind Zhuguan to make food. Just have the soldiers endure a little longer. Once we are certain that there's nothing wrong with the water in the city, we can have water brought over from Zhuguan. How could Zhuguan's water be affected too? A discussion started. Gu Shubai, who was the first person to notice that something was wrong with the water, stood up. Does everyone still remember how there was an attempt on my life at Changzhou last year? Yin Huasher's face became pale. I also drank some of the tea that came from that pot. Lao Jin looked at the teapot that had been left in the corner of the tent and was still in the mood to crack a joke. It's fortunate that I didn't drink the tea that you poured for me. Fortunate, quite fortunate. Visit Wuxia World. EU for extra chapters. Yao Huasher was not worried about himself as he looked at Gu Huaijiang. Head General also drank tea from that teapot. This is bad. Doctor, where's the doctor? The sound of soldiers screaming over the heavy rain could be heard coming from outside the tent. As Yin Zheng opened the tent flap to allow them inside. What happened? The soldier urgently said, It's bad. Head General, a number of soldiers have suddenly started having severe abdominal pain, stiff limbs, and some are coughing up white foam. It looks like they're about to die. Gu Huaijiang immediately stood up. Doctor, immediately go and treat the poisoned soldiers. I will go with you to take a look. The military doctor hastily packed up his medicine kit. Hearing the soldiers say that numerous soldiers had been poisoned, where should he go first? This was bad. This was really bad. The camp's water source had been poisoned, and large numbers of soldiers had been poisoned. If he could not cure them, would that not present Western Kuan with an opportunity? In an instant, it was as if the weight of a mountain was on his shoulders. With this heavy burden, the military doctor wiped some sweat from his brow. Gu Huaijiang and the others walked out of the tent, insisting on personally going to see the poisoned soldiers. Gu Hanemo suddenly remembered the large sack of medicine that Yu Fu had given him before he had set out. He waved to a soldier, Go and prepare the fever and detoxification medicine that the young miss provided. Bring some more people to carry out the preparations. Once it's been prepared, give it to the soldiers who drank water today. This is especially true of the head general. The soldiers wore bitter expressions. Third, young sir, there's poison in the water. What water should we use to prepare it? With the military doctor already going to Zhuguan City to inspect the water, even if there was nothing wrong with the water there, it would take some time for the water to be brought back. Gu Hanemo furrowed his brow and carefully thought about it. With the sound of the heavy rain assaulting his ears, he suddenly had an idea. Bring out clean containers and fill them with rainwater. Rainwater has no source, so it's the cleanest. The enemy can't possibly have put poison in the sky. The soldier's eyes immediately lit up. That's right. How could I not have thought of it? Third young sir is truly too smart. This subordinate will go immediately. Using Gu Hanmo's method, the military doctor sent many people to collect rainwater. After it was boiled, it was to be used to prepare medicine for the poisoned soldiers. Abdominal pain, stiff joints, white foam at the mouth. Based on these symptoms, he was completely unable to tell what poison was affecting the soldiers. There were countless unique poisons in the world. During his time as a doctor in the army, he had not seen so many unique poisons as he had in the past 2 years. First it was Kunlun snow, and now it was this unknown poison. What poison is affecting the soldiers? Has it been figured out yet? Sure enough, Gu Huaijiang asked this question, and the doctor cupped his hands in shame, replying to head general, "This subordinate is lacking in talent and does not even know what poison it is. The only thing that we can do for now is to prepare the medicine that young Miss Yufu provided and give it to the poisoned soldiers. They might be able to recover a little." He was ashamed and had nowhere to hide. In just a short couple of hours, thousands of soldiers had been poisoned. The immense burden of so many lives was something that he could not bear. Gu Huaijiang did not blame him. Instead, he personally helped him up. It's not that you have no talent. It's that Western Kuan planned ahead. How could they use a poison that you could uncover so easily? The enemy came prepared. This cannot be blamed on you. You just need to do your best to treat the poisoned. The military doctor's complexion improved greatly, repeatedly complying, "Head general, you also drank poisoned water today. Do you feel anything off with your body?" Gu Huaijiang steadily shook his head. Looking at his complexion, there was indeed nothing wrong. Yin Huasher only drank half a cup of tea, yet he had already made 7 or 8 trips to the latrine. Based on what Yin Zhang was saying, he had severe diarrhea and now could not get out of bed. He had drank more than just half a cup of tea, yet he himself felt nothing strange. Gu Shubai stood to the side and dispelled any confusion. "Father, you will be fine. Have you forgotten? People who have been treated by the deity of medicine are much sturdier than the average person." Chapter 293 finally figured it out. Part 3, Gu Jiegu walked through the rain, leading the doctor and some soldiers to inspect the well's water quality. During the few days prior, he had nothing else to do and would frequently accompany Lao Jin and the others in carrying sandbags around to block the flow of water. As a result, he had a greater understanding of the terrain near the mountains. There were a few wells in the camp that had been passed down through the generations in the Gu family's army. It was impossible for there to be no spies in the camp. What he suspected was that Western Kuan might have buried some pipes under the ground leading into the wells, or, like with the snakes on Zhu Mountain, they might have seized an opportunity to poison the wells in the Gu family's army's camp. Regardless of what method was used, if he searched the edge of the camp, he was sure to find something. Search the edge of the camp. Dig a hole every foot and see if there are any strange pipes. If you see any animals acting strangely, immediately tell me. Yes, second young sir. A group of soldiers wearing raincoats stood in a row with hose in hand and started digging. Very quickly, they came to realize that this method would not work. Immediately after moving some dirt with their hose, the heavy rain would spread the nearby dirt into the hole. This happened again and again, as the soldiers vigorously swung their hose, but they could only manage to dig holes the size of a bowl. Second young sir, we really can't dig any deeper. It's raining too heavily. The heavy rain dripped from Gu Jioga's bamboo hat like a bead curtain. He had been watching the soldiers and naturally understood why they could not dig any further. One person's efforts aren't able to overcome the rain. Form groups of 4 and dig together. I absolutely must see what there is beneath. With 4 people digging one hole together, they were finally able to overcome the speed at which rain was pushing mud back into the hole. Very quickly, they dug out a hole roughly half of a person's height deep. Gu Jiogu personally carried out the inspection. Ascertaining that there was nothing strange below, they continued digging toward the next location. They continued digging until the sky darkened, and the soldiers were gasping for air. They were so tired that they were on the verge of collapse. Second young sir, we've been digging all day. There haven't been any strange pipes down here. As for animals, a soldier looked around. Look at the weather. It's already difficult for people to go out. How could animals dare to come out? Speaking of it like this, both of his guesses had been fruitless. Gu Jiugu felt irritated. More than 10,000 troops have been poisoned, and thousands have died. Those who were in a slightly better condition are just weak and dehydrated. Those who are in a slightly worse condition are unable to get out of bed. If we can't figure out a way to treat the poison, we will quickly. Everyone understood what he was saying. Gu Jiugu let out a long sigh, calming himself down. Gu Huaijiang had said that no matter how difficult a situation might be, a military leader must remain steady. Otherwise, the soldiers would not have a reliable pillar of support, and the situation would quickly worsen. He tried to find his voice and did his best to speak in a calm tone. Finding a way to treat the poison is a matter for the military doctors. We won't be able to be of any assistance. At the very least, we can help look for where the poison came from and provide the military doctors with some clues. What do you guys think? Yes, second young sir is right. Gu Jiugu noticed that his voice sounded as steady as his father's and his eldest brother's. Good. Let's think for a moment. Aside from underground, where else could there be some clues? If we put our heads together and pool our wisdom together, we will definitely be able to come up with something. The soldiers were encouraged and started discussing the matter, as their focus moved between the sky and the ground multiple times. One soldier said, "The poison is definitely from Western Kuin's side, and our army doesn't have any outsiders. Western Kuin's people never come to our camp, yet they were able to poison our wells. They would need to use something that could fly. For example, they shot a poison arrow into our well, and that poisoned the water in our wells." His words were immediately refuted by someone else. That's impossible. If Western Kuin's people shot arrows toward our army, they would have been discovered long ago. More importantly, how much poison could one measly arrow carry? It wouldn't be able to affect tens of thousands of people. It would only be enough to cause one bout of diarrhea. Gu Jiugu nodded with a smile. This line of thinking is correct. Continue down this line of thinking. Let's continue thinking. The discussion became even more enthusiastic. Gu Jiugu looked up at the surrounding mountains with all sorts of thoughts racing through his mind. Aside from pipes, animals, and poison arrows, what else could carry it from Western Kuin's side to the Gu family's army's camp? As the rain fell, it brought shattered rocks and leaves down the mountains. One soldier lowered his head and picked something up from the ground, and everyone else looked over at him. "What did you pick up?" "Ha, it's just a broken rock. How is that worth picking up?" The soldier that had picked up the broken rock looked a little embarrassed. "Second young sir, take a look. It's a piece of jade." When this subordinate heard that head general and young general found a multicolored gem on Zhu Mountain, I was exceptionally envious. Just now, I saw that there was a rock with a bit of color in the mud, so I picked it up. Gu Jiugu received the broken rock from him. This broken rock was indeed different from the other rocks nearby. It looked like a broken rock from a jade mine that had been washed out by the rain. It had a bit of a crystalline quality. He smiled and gave the rock back to the soldier. Multicolored gems are found in jade mines. You were able to pick up a piece of jade this time, and you might find a multicolored gem next time. The Gu family's army's next triumph will be on your shoulders. The soldier sheepishly laughed. Gu Jiugu looked at the rainwater that endlessly surged from Western Kuin's side, and a thought suddenly came to mind. It was as if he had suddenly become enlightened. "I've got it. I know where the poison came from." Yu Fu and Yao Lan, who had barely managed to learn the rolling technique within a day, led the guards and prepared to leave the post house. Everyone was wearing thick raincoats and large bamboo hats. Beneath the hat and raincoat was a layer of oil paper. Even if their raincoats became completely soaked along the way, the oil paper would be able to keep the water out. Visit Wuxia World. EU for extra chapters. They wore waterproof deerskin boots. The soles of the boots were 1 inch high and made of wood that had an intricate design on the bottom. Even if they walked in the mud, they would not slip. Before setting out, Everyone drank a large bowl of medicinal soup, and everyone filled their water skins with medicine. Yu Fu had everyone drink it as if it was water. This also applied to her. After ample preparation, everyone at the post house rode out early in the morning and continued west. Regardless of how ample their preparations had been, after setting out, they ran into numerous situations that they had not expected. Yao Lan did not have enough training in riding a horse and could not pick up her speed at all. When she whipped the horse too hard, she was tossed to the ground by the horse. Fortunately, she learned how to break her fall by rolling out, and she only ended up with multiple bruises with no major injuries. Yu Fu decided to have her ride along with her. Her riding skill could not be considered amazing. Fortunately, she had grown up in a mortal's valley, thus there was a natural connection between her and animals. It was thanks to this that the horse did not get startled and throw her off its back when it fell into a large puddle. The journey was bumpy, and when they arrived at Lesser Zhu Pass, the rain finally eased up. "Young miss, do you want to rush directly to Zhu Guan while the rain is lighter? Head general and the camp are at Zhu Guan."
No.
Yu Fu dismounted from the horse and nearly fell to the ground from the weight of the raincoat. "I will go and rest at the post house for a bit. I need to see to Yao Lan's injuries and get cleaned up. You guys should get some rest and eat your fill. We will continue on our way in an hour." The soldiers raised their heads in confusion, quickly looking over Yu Fu. Having rushed here in the rain, her raincoat had become thoroughly soaked. A lock of wet hair was stuck to her cheek, and her lips were pale from being exposed to the rain and wind. The sheltered Princess Junjiang from the capital, the beloved daughter of Marquis Gu's manor, the center of their world and pampered beauty, was now wearing boots covered in mud. The post house was located in an area that saw a large amount of foot traffic. Nobody passing by could possibly imagine that this girl dressed like a fisherman's wife was actually the famous Princess Junjiang. The soldiers scratched their heads in embarrassment. "Young miss is in a poor state after the journey. You should get washed up first. We subordinates will go and prepare some food." After saying this, they retreated, leaving Yu Fu and Yao Lan in the room. Yu Fu let out a long sigh. First, she removed Yao Lan's clothes to check on her injuries. Seeing that her hands and feet had multiple bruises that had already turned purple, she knew that they were injuries from when she had fallen from her horse. Such large bruises, they must hurt quite a bit, right? Yu Fu chatted with her to distract her while applying medicine to her injuries. Yao Lan gritted her teeth. "It doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt." Yu Fu clearly knew that she was lying but could only console her by saying, "I know that it must hurt a lot, but don't worry. Once we arrive at Zhuguan, you can rest in bed every day. You don't need to do anything. I will have someone feed you. How does that sound?" Yao Lan did not know whether to laugh or cry. "Young miss, that's something from when I was little. Why are you bringing it up now? I will apply the medicine myself. Young miss, quickly go and wash up. Once you have finished washing up, you still need to eat." They would be setting out in an hour. Adding in the time needed to eat, where was there any time to wash up? Yu Fu just picked up a comb and combed the hair at her temples. Looking at a bronze mirror, she felt that her complexion was a little pale and turned to ask, "Yao Lan, do you have any makeup?" "Makeup? Young miss, you don't even have any makeup on you. How could I have any?" Yu Fu let out a sigh. Arriving at Zhu Guan with such a pale complexion, they would surely be extremely worried about her. Chapter 294, Short Soldier, Part 4. In my youth, I listened to the rain in a brothel with the faint scent of red candles filling the air. In the prime of my life, I listened to the rain in a distant boat on a vast body of water with low-hanging clouds. The sounds of geese crying filled the autumn air. Now, I listen to the rain in a monk's home with the hair at my temples dotted with gray like stars in the night sky. Life goes through ups and downs without stopping to be considerate. All I can do is listen to the rain drip on the front entrance. In the night, someone sat on the ground and drank wine under the canopy of a black tent. Wine spilled from the cup onto the ground, as the person was very drunk. With a sudden surge of inspiration, they recited a poem while listening to the heavy rain outside. His reciting of this poem caused him to laugh. Behind him, Some soldiers looked toward the entrance to the tent. The rain had gotten much smaller in the afternoon, but it had picked back up again. This caused the Kuan character on the banner to stick to itself. His Highness the Seventh Prince had arrived 2 days earlier. Only after learning that tens of thousands of Eastern Ling soldiers had been poisoned did he order for the military banner to be changed. The ice-cold raindrops splashed inside, and a soldier raised an arm to block it. "Your Highness the Seventh Prince, come inside the tent to rest. The rain is falling heavier and heavier." Kuan Wushang looked up with bloodshot eyes. "When you look at this rain, what emotions do you feel?" The soldier that had been questioned was stunned. What emotions? This subordinate naturally hopes that the rain will fall harder and harder to have the poison that we planted on Zhu Mountain washed into Eastern Ling's camp. Like that, we can win without needing to fight. The soldier's eyes were filled with joy and respect for Kuan Wushang. In the past, he had not heard of the Seventh Prince. After finding out that he was the new head general, most of the army was quite displeased. He had arrived in a rush on a rainy day. His noble robes were completely soaked from traveling through the rain and wind, and it looked as if water could be squeezed from the light yellow robes. He said, "I won't ask that you overpower the enemy. Instead, I ask that you outsmart them. I have been studying in Immortals Valley for 7 years, and naturally have my methods." After this, large sandbags filled with powdered poison were piled onto Zhu Mountain. With the heavy rain and the shape of the terrain, all of the poison was washed on Eastern Ling's side. Within a few days, a scout reported that a large number of soldiers from the Gu family's army had been poisoned. Soldiers perished without a fight, and this mysterious Seventh Prince quickly became a stalwart figure in the minds of the soldiers. Kuan Wushang smiled sarcastically. "That's right. This is how a young person should feel." Listen to the rain from inside a brothel, while the fragrance of red candles fills the air. In any case, it's a joyous matter. The soldier did not understand what he meant. "Is your Highness not happy?" Once the situation on the border was reported to the capital, it would definitely be regarded as a military accomplishment. Emperor Kuan would surely reward him. Why did his expression look so ugly? The fragrant wine before him did not seem like it was for a celebration. Instead, it looked a bit like wine meant to drown his sorrows. Happy? He could not bring himself to rejoice. Life goes through many ups and downs without ever stopping to rest. We can rejoice for now, but what about in the future? With such a large quantity of poison flowing into Eastern Ling's borders, it will extend far past where the Gu family's army is camped. For at least 1 decade, absolutely nothing will grow. Aside from soldiers, it will also hurt innocent citizens. When the history books are written, I, Kuan Wushang, will be viewed as a war criminal. The soldiers fell silent for a moment. "But you will be someone who will have contributed the most to our Western Kuan." Kuan Wushang said, "You're wrong. There's nothing that can remain unchanged. The 3 countries of Western Kuan, Northern Ling, and Eastern Ling have been separated for no more than 100 years. Things are constantly changing. It's possible that the 3 countries will unite in a few decades, and responsibility for this poisoned and blood-soaked land will fall on me. The evidence is irrefutable." When that time came, when there was neither a Western Kuan nor Eastern Ling, there would only be a unified continent. The residents of the 3 countries would spurn him. For the sake of personal gain, a perfectly fine region would become a hell on earth. The fertile land would become a desolate wasteland. After all, something like using such a large quantity of poison during a war had never been done before, and nobody had ever thought of it. Coming back around on the matter, when he was young, he set out for Immortals Valley on his own. Rather than learn medicine, he insisted on learning about poisons. Was it not just for this day? The soldier hesitated, then helped hold him up while quietly saying, "It's already quite amazing that we could take some of Eastern Ling's wealthy cities. How could the 3 countries unite?" This subordinate feels that the 3 countries will always remain divided. Northernly to the north was the largest of the 3 countries, yet it never attacked Western Kuan or Eastern Ling, while Western Kuan was unable to defeat Eastern Ling, and Eastern Ling had no interest in invading Western Kuan. The 3 countries were in a delicate balance. Not even Western Kuan's continued belligerence could break this balance. The vast majority of people felt this way, not just the soldiers. Emperor Kuan alone refused to give up on the idea of annexing Eastern Ling before devouring Northern Li. His ambitions were too grand. They were so grand that they would not come true even after he died. Kuan Wushang had a strange smile on his face. That's right. If the three countries can continue to remain divided like this, how great would that be? He suddenly pushed the soldier away and staggered into the tent. Pass down this order. Have the spies closely monitor the Gu family's army's movements. Once the rain stops, immediately launch an assault. On this rainy night, the main tent in the Gu family's army's camp was brightly illuminated with many people coming and going. A cloud of death hung over the camp, as everyone wore distressed expressions without the slightest hint of anger. Watching the soldiers that fought alongside them pass away without putting up a fight and without suffering created a stifling atmosphere. Reporting to head general, sure enough, the Western Kuan's army is under the Kuan banner. The new general is the 7th prince of Western Kuan, Kuan Wushang. Reporting to head general, all of the sandbags that could be moved have already been moved over, but it can only block the flow of the water. I fear that it won't be able to prevent the poison from seeping in. Reporting to head general, all of the best doctors in the nearby cities have already been brought over. They are currently working hard with the military doctors to treat the soldiers. Visit Wuxia World. EU for extra chapters. Gu Huaijiang sat behind a desk while remaining as composed as usual. Have the people sent to the capital already set out? They set out the day after we discovered that the water was the source of the poison. They should have already arrived at the capital. It's just that I fear that it will take over 10 days for Yu Fu to arrive at Zhuguan. When he brought up Yu Fu, everyone carefully observed Gu Huaijiang's expression to try and find any hint of hesitation in his eyes. Gu Huaijiang looked around at everyone, and they all lowered their curious eyes. He turned around. There was not just hesitation in his eyes. There was also concern and helplessness. If he had any other choice, he truly hoped to have Yu Fu always remain in the capital and remain the princess that he could protect. He hoped that she could live a happy and carefree life. Unfortunately, tell the doctors that even if they can't fully treat the poison, they need to do their best to delay the onset of the poison. Over 10,000 soldiers have already died. The survivors absolutely must be kept alive during that time. Gu Shubai said, over 100,000 soldiers drank the poison water. Too many have already died as a result of being poisoned. After so many days have passed, the ones who were lightly poisoned, like General Yin, have already started recovering. There are another 50,000 who are still recovering in bed. Yin Huasher drank half a cup of tea and suffered from diarrhea for an entire day. After spending 3 days recovering in bed, he was barely able to get up. He was fortunate. The water in the main tent was the cleanest in the camp and had the lowest concentration of poison. He also had a strong and healthy body, thus he gradually started recovering after drinking some detoxifying medicine. The normal soldiers of the army were not as lucky. It's extremely fortunate that we noticed that the water was poisoned early on. Now that the camp is using water from Zhuguan for food, no new cases of poisoning have occurred. Gu Huaijiang nodded his head. It's good that nothing has happened to Zhuguan City's citizens. Aside from curing the poison, the most important matter is to pay close attention to the movements of Western Kuan's army. Our soldiers have been poisoned and lost a great deal of fighting power. Now is their best chance to attack. Lao Jin beat his chest and replied, Head General, don't worry. Even if we must breathe our last breath, we won't allow Western Kuan to succeed. In the past, nobody had ever said such a thing during battle. The Gu family's army was accustomed to winning their battles and never losing, nor had they ever encountered such an urgent situation. The current problem was that they lacked manpower. Aside from the ones who had been poisoned, they also needed people to take care of them. The remaining people were few and disordered. The army was in a panic, and when there was panic, it made it difficult to combat the enemy. All this time, the rain continued to fall. This heavy rain really benefited Western Kuan. Gu Huaijiang looked into the rainy night. This rain is about to come to an end. After the rain stops, a new round of fighting will quickly begin. Early the next morning, the group bringing water from Zhuguan was in high spirits. cheering as soon as they entered the camp. The main tent could faintly hear the sound of this commotion, and Gu Huaijiang did not quite believe what he was hearing. The army was in a dire situation filled with soldiers who were sick. Who could possibly be rejoicing at a time like this? Gu Jiugu pushed the curtain to the side and found his sight partially obstructed by the rain. It was as Gu Huaijiang had said. It was finally about to stop raining. Father, it's the group that went to fetch water. I'll go and see what they're doing. A crowd of people was gathered in one place, and Gu Jiugu pushed the soldiers aside until he saw a snort soldier wearing a raincoat in the middle. A large bamboo had obstructed their face, and their appearance could not be seen. How could such a short soldier have been sent to fetch water? Just as Gu Jiugu was about to start questioning the soldiers, the short soldier looked up, and a beautiful and familiar face appeared. A smile appeared on their pale lips. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.